time zone differences. I'm another day after people in Britain and America and so forth, and Canada, and the scheduling is virtually impossible. So I'm just going to insert my bits ahead of time and leave it to Marco and to James and to Davey and the crew and David to do the best they can. I'm doing the best I can under the circumstance. Here in New Zealand time, May the 11th, which is Saturday, we have a double session, 10 a.m. to 2 in the afternoon at the Panmure Community Hall in Auckland, New Zealand. The Panmure Community Hall is located on Pilkington Road in Panmure, Auckland. Pilkington Road, Panmure, Auckland, 10 a.m. on Saturday until 2 in the afternoon. We have a double session. One of the subjects will be dealing, of course, with prophecy, and we will be addressing contemporary events in the Middle East somewhat. On Sunday, we will be at the Buckland Community Center in Auckland at Pukekohe at the Buckland Community Center here in Auckland. The details are available again on the Moriel website, moriel.org, or just Google Moriel itinerary. Hope to see you then. After that, we'll be going down to Christchurch and then on to Wellington. But right now we are in Auckland, and if you're in the Auckland area or somewhere proximal in the North Island, we look forward to seeing you. We know we have people from Tauranga as far away as Hamilton, Wairoa, and so forth. And it is a blessing and a pleasure to be back in New Zealand after being away so long due to COVID and so forth. Well, a couple of things I'd just like to address in the segment I've been allotted by the time factors. One is, of course, going to be what's happening in Israel and the policies of the Biden administration, now showing their true colors as never before, or the Joe Obama administration, as they should be called. But I'm also outrageously disturbed at the absurdity of the demands of the Chicago Teachers Union. Now, remember, the Chicago Teachers Union has one of the lowest academic performances in terms of teacher evaluation in the United States. It is not due to lack of funding. The schools are overfunded. We spend more money per student than most countries in the world. The problem, obviously, lies with the educational bureaucracy, which is there to indoctrinate, not educate, and with the teachers' unions that are nothing more than a political campaign fund for the left wing of the Democratic Party. The mayor of Chicago is a former teacher, so the teachers' union have their man taking the place of Lori Lightfoot, who tried to destroy the city with her policies. Now you have Johnson, who's as bad, if not worse. Crime is going through the roof, but understand the demands of the teachers' unions. Chicago is a financially troubled city, Businesses and industries are leaving Chicago because of the crime, because of the outrageous taxation, because of the influx of illegal immigrants. Businesses are leaving, the middle class is leaving. Yet the teachers union is demanding not $50 million more. In their new contract, they want $50 billion, 50,000 million dollars more for a bankrupt city, or a city that is teetering just above bankruptcy. You've got Walmarts closing. You've got shopping malls closing down. Businesses closing shop because of the legalization of crime. They've got a useless prosecutor who's essentially pro-crime in her policies. Now, you have that in other cities, like with Krasner in Philadelphia and Bragg in New York and in Los Angeles and so forth, but she is of that ilk. It's just out of control. How can a city that is insolvent afford $50 billion to an already overfunded school system? Now, let's look at the results of the school system in Chicago. 21% of eighth graders cannot read at an eighth grade level. Only 21% can. Only 21. 79% of eighth graders in Chicago, in the Chicago public school system, cannot read at an eighth grade level. Eighth graders who can't read. 79% can't read properly. Only 21% can read at that level that is age appropriate and grade appropriate. Math, only 16%. 16% have the mathematical proficiency of an eighth grader. That means 84% are mathematically incompetent. Now, how in a high-tech economy can you possibly have students ready to take their place in high-tech jobs involving mathematical skills, computer skills, and coding? You cannot. The biggest failures, it's an across-the-board failure, but by far the biggest victims of this failure are minority students. Yet, Black people will vote for the failure of their own schools. They will vote to keep their own children stupid and out of the job market. And after they vote in their stupidity for the Democratic Party, after they vote to deprive their children of any chance of a future because they're illiterate and innumerate, they're going to yell racism because that's what they've been called to do. This is the teachers' union. We've been warning for years about people like Randy Weingarten and the teachers' unions nationally. But now we're talking about the Chicago Teachers Union, which is one of the worst. They're demanding more money for abortion. They're demanding more money for illegal immigrant students. Not for American students, not for Black and Hispanic American students. They want an increased budget for people with no legal right to be in the country. They want paid abortion benefits for teachers and housing benefits for teachers. These are people who get over 3 months a year paid vacation. Other people are working 2 jobs. Teachers are getting 3 months a year paid vacation. And they want a salary increase that will push their average earnings up above $140,000 to $145,000 a year with 3 months off. They want to be paid for failing the students, for failing the children, and for failing minorities above all. Now, some people in Chicago are waking up, and some minorities, some Black people are waking up, but not enough. Spritzer has signed a bill that will make it more and more difficult for anybody but Democrats to get elected. You have to have a candidate who's in a primary to get on the ballot. So if there's no opposition within the party, if the party is united on back of one candidate, he can't run. This is an attack on democracy by Spritzer, but this is what people vote for. The people in Chicago are voting to have the Walmarts closed. They're voting to have a food desert. And they're voting to keep their own children stupid and have no place in the job market or in a high-tech economy. They're voting to hold themselves and their children down and keep the Black people as the lowest people on the totem pole. Why isn't that money going to Black students, to inner city students? But they'll vote for Democrat. This is a union. Now, here's the clincher. Not only do they want $50 billion, where is that money going to come from? We're up in arms about $61 billion given to Ukraine. This is $50 billion to an already overfunded school system. Why do I say it's overfunded? Because teacher pay should be linked to job performance. But the Chicago Teachers Union's demanding a complete uncoupling of teacher evaluation from pay scales. In other words, we can do as lousy a job as we want. We can continue to fail the taxpayer and fail the children and get paid more money for doing it with no accountability. That's what they're demanding. And they've got their man as mayor of Chicago. You couldn't make this up again. But finally, they want Chicago schools Chicago schools. Now remember the gun crime, the knife crime, children being shot dead by drug gangs going to and from school. The drug epidemic in school, including fentanyl among children. That's what you vote for. That's what you get. Some people in Chicago, including a number of black people, have woken up and realized the truth. Some have. The majority have not. They'll vote for Johnson just because he's black. They will cheer Kim Fox even when their own children are being shot dead on their way to school. It's hopeless. Hopeless. I also believe it's God's judgment. Unspeakable. Chicago. Yeah. I used to like Chicago.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. And Jacob is in New Zealand, but he's not here today. You heard his hot take, and that was very good. And we thank the Lord for him. In Jacob's place, we have our brother from Israel.
Yeah, I can't really fill his shoes, I'm afraid.
Well, I'm not sure what kind of size shoes he wears, but
I think they're size 13s.
13. Okay, so he beat me.
Something like that. Yeah, they're huge.
Yeah. So I don't know what size of shoes you wear, Andy.
I'm just about size 10.5 to 11.
Okay,
Jacob
a little
has much
bigger
bigger
than
feet than I do.
Yeah. So welcome, Andy. How are you, brother?
I'm okay, thank you. Yes, it's yeah, I'm all right.
Blessings from Israel. Blessings from Israel, right?
Yeah.
And blessings to you. Thank you for being with us. It is late in Israel, so we do appreciate you being up with us. And hopefully we don't disrupt your sleeping schedule. So I'm glad you're with us. Inside joke. All right. David Lister, how are you, brother?
I'm all right from beautiful New Zealand.
Amen. Well, it's, I guess it's early, not that early, but it is early.
Yeah, I had my time messed up, so I got up at 4:30, so I would be ready for you at 6.
All right.
I found out it was really 7. So anyway.
There's always the trouble of traveling. Yeah. Well, not too far from you, it's Davey in Australia.
Morning. Good to be with you guys.
Amen. Thank you, Davey. Thank you for being up earlier, a little earlier than David, but earlier nonetheless. And I guess, Jay, we can't complain. We got up later than that, but I know you've been working all morning, but you're here. Southern California. How are you, Jay?
I am doing well, thanking God for the beauty that is California as far as the landscape.
Yeah.
It's one of the most beautiful places,
Absolutely true.
Yeah.
Absolutely true.
Just don't go down to, some of the LA area there. You lose sight of the real beauty of it. So nonetheless.
It's covered with waste. Of different types, trash bags and used needles.
There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. So we thank everyone for being here and those who are watching live on all the different platforms, including Rumble, Memorial TV, memorialtv.org, Vimeo. We're doing Vimeo anymore. Jay, we're not doing Vimeo anymore, are we?
We are, because there is actually growth there. Believe it or not, we have about 300 watchers that are watching us consistently on Vimeo. So we thank you for those watching on Vimeo.
Yeah.
Praise God. Praise the Lord. Give a hand to the Lord. And we're on Twitter, or formerly known as Twitter. It's X now.
X.
People get mad about that now. So it is X, and we're want to grow on that area. And we have some more things that we want to do on X. And I know, Andy, you're on X.
Yes, I am. Yes, I do.
David Lister, you're on X.
Yes, hidden from the public and
And Jay, you're on X, and I heard Ken Smith is on X too. So hey, I just got to catch up. We got to do something on X. So maybe we'll
At least for the time being, X is the place to be, isn't it?
X is the place to be. Yeah, we just need to
Yeah.
get Davey. Davey, we need you on X, Davey.
Oh, I am actually there.
Oh, incognito.
Yeah, incognito.
That's good. That's good. Well, based on the e-safety regulator there from America that's pushing that agenda, I would stay incognito too.
Too late for that with me.
gotta learn to ask questions. I'm just asking a question. I'm not making an accusation. It sounded like an accusation. Well, I can't help how you understand my question.
That's very good. That's very good. But we're going to do something on X. So hopefully we'll do it. We'll do it soon, but it should be a lot of fun. And so welcome everyone who's watching. We have Andy, David Lister, Davey, and Jay, and myself, Marco, and we are going to have catching up, I guess, without Jacob today. Usually catching up with Jacob, but catching up without Jacob. And we can hear Jacob on different platforms. You got video, you got podcasts. Podcast it's a great way to find a lot of good audio, a lot of good teachings from Sandy, from David, other teachers there, myself, other believers there who have been on, and we got to get some of Andy's stuff on there. And you can find Andy's stuff on X, on YouTube. What is the name
it is on X,
YouTube channel? Andy, what is it called? Doctrine Matters?
Yeah, something like Because Doctrine Matters. Yeah, that's
Doctrine Matters. And some good stuff. I mean, we got some videos. We got it on Memorial TV from YouTube, and good stuff, and hope you keep making good stuff. And not only refuting the Tikkun group that is making headways in Israel. Oh, that's a headache, isn't it?
Yeah, that was a headache. Yeah,
and also
things have gone quiet now for a while, but I don't know. I'm sure something will break out again soon.
Well, here in America, the NAR, as this is called here, NAR, New Apostolic Reformation, Tikkun in Israel, here they've been making headways because as we get closer to the election, they believe they're going to put their man in the White House and they're going to become very influential in the dominionist aspect and the spiritual aspect of it. So there's quite a bit of an uproar within the NAR movement because they see things going the opposite way, censorship and the leftist ideology and Marxism and protests against Israel and all these things. So on the one hand, they seem to be supportive of Israel. On the other hand, they also have different nefarious, I guess, outcomes in their eschatology that they would like to bring about. So thank you for refuting them online. Thank you for putting out some really good videos, and also some refuting other doctrines in terms of eschatology that we'll talk about today, and bringing some to that, some of that to light, and addressing those issues. So we appreciate you coming on. So David Lister.
Go on. I was just saying, many years ago, because like the NAR that you see today is really an outgrowth of what in the UK was called the Restoration movement, and it was people like Daniel Juster, and who really popularized Restorationism was originally replacementist, and they were vehemently anti-Israel. I can remember their magazines back in the 1980s. They were very, very pro, Palestinian, that a lot of that the modern NAR is much more Israel friendly, and that's down to the work of people like the Tikkun people, because they were kind of like a fifth column in the Messianic movement. They brought a lot of the and they used the Messianic movement actually was what brought the pro-Israel flavor into Restorationism, and made it more acceptable to evangelicals.
Yeah, they're more palatable. We'll talk about that for sure, because guys like Michael Brown are involved in that, and the Tikkun movement, they're very much involved in that, and especially lots of confusion because pro-Israel. And there's good believers that are pro-Israel and things like that, but they have a different outcome and a different eschatology and a different code of understanding Scripture. So there's that. So we'll bring that up for sure. And David Lister, where are you guys going to be at in New Zealand over the next couple of days?
Well, we're speaking in and around Auckland, Then we're headed over to Christchurch, and then back from Christchurch to Wellington before we move on to Australia.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. And we're praying. We're definitely praying for the Lord to move within those meetings. And in Wellington, been there, Auckland, and then there's such a wonderful reception by believers there. We miss them so much and hope to be there. And I'm so glad Jacob's there, teaching and preaching and bringing believers together, and hopefully more growth in terms of meetings and fellowship after Jacob leaves, because that was really the most important part of after Jacob leaves. So, David, he's coming to Australia. You guys ready?
We're in the process of getting ready. We got quite a lot of work to do in the next week, but very important announcement. There is an extra meeting added now. We have been able to secure a meeting room in Melbourne. It's
awesome.
On the Thursday, not the Friday. So it'll be Thursday. Let me get the date right. I think it's May 30th. And it'll be at the Melbourne Airport at the Holiday Inn. So Thursday, May 30, 6 p.m. at the Holiday Inn, Melbourne Airport. It is a very small meeting room, so please RSVP to morielaustralia@gmail.com to advise if you plan on attending. We don't want to be turning anyone away, but we do have limited space. So if you could please let us know if you plan on attending. We'd really appreciate it.
That's awesome. morielaustralia@gmail.com. Please get a hold of them. The itinerary will be updated on the website, but I think it's pretty much 90% done on the website already. I think there's just the meetings in Melbourne and Geelong that need to be put up, but it's already confirmed that it's going to be there.
Mia's fixed it up.
Mia's got them up, so we're good.
Got them up. They're there, so there's no excuse. If you're in the area, you need to be there. Sell your shirt and go to see Jacob over there in Geelong, Melbourne. Well, he's also going to be in other places too. He's going to be in Perth, right, Davey? He's going to be in Queensland. He's going to be in Queensland, Brisbane, and in Sydney. So it's going to be an awesome time.
Yeah, that's right.
So you guys are going to be so blessed, and the great blessing, it happens afterwards too, where you guys meet together and fellowship together with believers that we previously didn't meet and before, and then they're there, and then we strike up a conversation, and you got a longtime brother and sister that comes out of those meetings. So I pray that it goes really well. Thank you, Davey. Thank you for all your efforts, you and Rihanna, and of course Pierre in New Zealand with his wife. So wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So I think those are all the announcements that we have. Let's get caught up. And so we're all participating in this as we talk about certain developments that are coming, not only what's in the news now, but what fits within our understanding of the Bible and biblical prophecy. And one of the things that I've seen is the growing anti-Semitism in the West. There's always been anti-Semitism in the world. And in the West, it always seemed to be that this is where Jewish believers would come, Jewish people would come to escape the Holocaust, to escape Nazism, to escape the pogroms in Russia, to escape these things. Now it's meeting them here. In the horrifying scenes of protesters and attacking Jews and attacking Jewish students and professors, horrifying things in Europe. The video of in Athens. So I'm gonna start with you, Andy. You live in Israel. You're there.
Yes.
You come from the West. You come from the UK, and we're here in America. But the mob that is storming colleges, universities, hotels, it's disturbing. How do you take it, and how do you see, especially living in the Middle East?
You mean when you say about you mean talking about the anti-Semitism in Greece or something, or
in the West, just in the West period.
Yeah.
Europe, we're talking Europe, we're talking America, especially the colleges and universities, talking the UK, your home country, your birth country. So understanding it from the Middle Eastern perspective, you're there as a believer, as a Christian in the Middle East. You see this in the West. Previously, we never saw this before to this degree.
Not on this scale, no.
Yeah.
And
So
this level of intensity.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that.
Okay, well, first of all, it's my wife that's Jewish more than I'm a Gentile. It's Beverly, my wife, that's Jewish, but she gets very upset by it all. Very upset. She bursts into tears when she sees his stuff because she never saw any of that when she was growing up. She only very mild but now it's with the intensity of things, and it's hard to know what to say really about where this because to some extent at least from I see some of these things as a judgment in a sense. We know that the West is under judgment. I don't think there's any believers would really doubt that. But it is intensely distressing to see anyway, because you just see the same patterns of history repeating themselves. It looks like Britain is looking like the Weimar Republic. A weak, compromised government that is allowing radicals and extremists to walk all over it. And of course, you've got the same problem in the US as well. And people are losing confidence in the democratic system because nothing seems to be changing, and the leadership of each country is encouraging this stuff by at the worst, and at least not doing anything to stop it at the very best. It grieves me intensely living here in the Middle East. You actually feel safer here with the Hezbollah on the border over there, and the Hamas in Gaza, and the on the other side. You actually feel safer here than you would in Europe, which is bizarre.
It is bizarre, isn't it? I got a question. Well, in the UK, in America here, do you think, and I watched this video of this lady, she was so honest, probably the most truthful, honest interview by anybody that I've seen in a long time. And she was talking about it's time to get out as Jews. We're a very small percentage of the population, both in the US, that's true. In the UK, that's also true. And she says, from a non-Christian perspective, she says, we need to go. We need to find some land in Israel. It's a time for Jews to get out of America, as they have been been marginalized, even with Jewish leaders in Congress, at least here in the States. Andy, do you echo that sentiment? I mean, and it's a pretty strong statement, but, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what's your take on that lady's perspective?
On the whole, I think I have to agree with it. There is, when you look at the quality of the political leadership in the UK and in the US. I mean, you've got Trump in the US. He might get in. You might get a reprieve, but in the UK, certainly, or mainland Europe, I don't think the political will is there to stop this. And so, in other words, I would just get out of there, because things can happen so fast. The borders could close down so fast to stop people getting out. It could be like 1938 all over again, or something like that.
36 and 38, absolutely.
Once it's so easy now to with all the computerization and the surveillance they have now, to shut down ability to travel very quickly. There'll be no slipping out over the borders at night. Because and getting out from the UK, because it's an island, for example, it'd be very hard to get out from there and make up. I think this, if Europe really does get Islamicized, it'll be far worse than the Nazis ever were.
No,
far worse and more brutal. I think they'll be just murdering people on the streets.
Let me ask you this, David Lister, do you think that there is that call? Some Jews have said this. Now, obviously, I'm not a Jew, you're not a Jew, but we have a relationship with Jewish believers, and we love Jewish people, and we have a relationship with non-believing Jews. But as a whole, in the trajectory of America, I'm not saying today, May 10th, 2024, but the trajectory of it, do you think it'll be a time where Jews actually leave America?
Well, I think some are already doing it. But, look, Lord is calling them back, and he's making the world uncomfortable for them. The Antichrist time is coming. The world is under the god of confusion. I see it like on the social medias I'm in on that people that are calling themselves Christians have raised up a banner that they were to hate the Jews, they're the Christ killers, and all this other things, and the replacement theology, and they're confused. And I'm asked a question, as I support them. I said, look, how could you call yourself a Christian when God gives you a new commandment to love one another?
Amen.
And then if they are your enemy, you're called to love your enemy. So there's no room to hate if you're a Christian. And so not only do they say that, but they say, well, the Jews do this, the Jews do this, and all that. I said, well, the Jews are just like any other nation. Okay, they have people that are religious, they have people that are not religious, people that do good things, people that do bad things, just like the rest of the world. But God has a purpose for them, and it's a time clock for the world. And so I have to point out that, that yes, not all Jews are Jews, because who's a Jew is he who circumcises his heart. And we think in Romans 9, Romans 2, that, just because you call yourself a Jew doesn't make you one. And then also we know this nation is something special that he's bringing them back to. But at the same time, we know they're secular in that effect. But God still has a purpose for them, and it's going to unfold in the coming years. But I wrote 2 articles 10, 15 years ago, part 1 and part 2 on the rise of anti-Semitism. I said it would be getting worse, and it is. It's the worst I've ever seen. And
we need to bring those out. When did you write them, David?
Like 10 years plus, I think.
We need to bring those out.
Yeah, I'll have to get them back out and put them up. But yeah, it's only getting worse now, and I'll tell you why there's confusion within the church. Is because people have not been discipled. People don't know what they believe. There's this guy who runs the website, has 50,000 followers, okay? And he writes these questions, and they're like simple questions. Where do you find, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh, and the Word, and I said, that's too easy. I don't even want to answer. And he said, he asked me, go look at the answers. And, he gets 15, 20,000 replies on these things, and they're all over the place. They don't Genesis. They don't,
Wow.
They don't know this. And these are people calling themselves Christian. They have no Christian literacy. I just answer a question with a scripture, and people freak out. Oh, that's such a great great answer. For me, it just comes, you answer people's questions with the scripture, but they don't do that. It's people's opinions out there. And people have not trained themselves and washed their minds and renewed them. And so the absence of scriptures from people's lives and the carnality that people calling them Christians. I can't believe it, Marco, the profane language that is used. Even for women, it's just unbelievable, and they don't think anything of it.
We certainly lost the way.
If I may add something, one thing is we've lost all sense of historical reference. The seeds that we're seeing today were planted 60 years ago when we took people like Klaus Barbie from the Gestapo and brought them into the CIA. We took almost 200 former Nazis and brought them into the most sensitive areas of our intelligence gathering. So think about that. We planted the seeds of anti-Semitism inside our intelligence. And it's not just us. It's Russia did the same thing. They took the best and the brightest that the Nazis had to offer, incorporated them into their mechanisms. The UK did the same thing as counterintelligence. So scientists, Operation Paperclip, definitely you had Werner von Braun and many other prominent scientists being brought in.
Medicine. Look at the medicine we got today.
Correct.
They teach you to kill and make you sick.
Yep. So all of these things, we've sowed them. We lusted after what the Germans had, which was the war machine. We incorporated it into ourselves, and now we're wondering, why are our students anti-Semitic? Why is the worldview going anti-Semitic? Well, these seeds were planted. We didn't cut it off at the root. We didn't expose it for what it was. We let it go.
Yeah, and we lived with it. Yeah, we tolerated it and thought we can control it. Yeah, and control it. But let me guys ask you this, back to anyone wants to jump in on this. Is this prophetic that the Jews will have to go back to the land?
Yeah,
100%.
100%, absolutely. God is calling them back. And there's a lot of Jews that get comfortable in other places like America. It's a great place, been for a long time. Loves the Jews, gives them great homes and opportunities and lives and everything. Let them recover from the Holocaust, and they've raised their kids. But now these God wants to bring back because he's got to deal with them. He wants to protect them. But the whole world is getting ready to feel the wrath of, in my opinion, Antichrist, and eventually the wrath of the Lord for those that don't know him.
Now, historically, Jews left Europe. They left Russia. They left Poland, places like Poland. Very few out of Germany. Unfortunately, they didn't heed some of the warnings. They went to Israel, and they obviously the nation began in 1948. We know the story here. And but I got to ask you this question: in Reformed theology, they don't consider that because they don't consider Israel as being a nation of anything to do with God's prophetic purposes. They see the return of Israel to the land as part of the exiles from Babylon. I want to kind of unpack that, see what you guys address that, because in Reformed theology, and not all of them, because there are some Reformed that are premillennial, they see Israel as a big part of God's purposes. But the exile back with Nehemiah and Ezra and coming back to the land in the first century, and the New Testament was written with Jews who came back from exile. They said that's the fulfillment of Jeremiah's prophecies, Isaiah's prophecies of coming back into the land. So they don't see Israel today as having of any significant at all purposes, or even for any Christians to be involved with Israel. So just want to, any one of you can discuss it and unpack that a little bit more. Are they Reformed in this perspective? Are they wrong?
Well, many of them tell us we're living in the millennium right now.
Yes, yeah. That's the post-mill view.
So when you get one thing wrong, you're often off on other things. And so they are replacement, many of them, replacement in their ideology. And so you have to wonder if this God of theirs that has replaced Israel and who he made a covenant with can't keep his promise to the Jews. Why do we feel safe in believing he'll keep his promises to the church? I mean, we're worse off. He gave us the Holy Spirit. He gave us a complete Old Testament, New Testament of scriptures. He's given us many infallible proofs through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and we've messed it up. So why would he keep his promises to us if he didn't keep them to them?
And I think in Ezekiel too, I think in Ezekiel too, it says like they'll be gathered from all the nations too, and they'll be brought back as one nation, not a divided nation anymore too. So
37,
that's a question they'd have to answer.
One of the things also, I think it's Ezekiel 36, that the nation would be regathered in disobedience. They wouldn't be regathered as a converted people, but they'd be regathered in disobedience. And I mean, also the present as things are present in Israel. I think this is also, I mean, I've said it before. It's a prophetic precursor to certain other events. You have to have Jews in the land, for the temple to be rebuilt in the first place. That's, and even if the present state of Israel is not specifically prophesied, there are other prophecies that depend upon a Jewish national presence here. So that's important to remember as well.
Mark, to your point about them being regathered with Nehemiah and Ezra, yes, but they were scattered in 70 AD.
Yes.
So just as we see multiple fulfillments that take us to the final eschaton, they skip right over 70 AD, and the prophecies of Jesus Christ, who they believe, said that, when you see Jerusalem surrounded, recapitulating that prophecy to get out of town, when you see this happen. And so they did. James, brother of Jesus, out, and they were saved. But then Jerusalem on the 9th of Av was destroyed again. So now they were scattered again to further nations, and now God is bringing them back since 1948. And with the rise of anti-Semitism, it's going to prompt more calls like this lady that you mentioned. She's right. People have to go there, but then they have to understand, as Jews, they're going there because of judgment, and God wants to deal with them, just like God is going to deal with the church.
Yeah, and I think Jeremiah.
Go ahead, brother.
I was going to say Jeremiah makes it pretty clear too, that Israel will not cease from being a nation as long as we have the sun, moon, stars, the seasons.
The stars endure. Yes,
right.
It's pretty clear. Romans 9 through to 11. Paul makes it pretty clear, is God cast off his people? God forbid, he's able to graft them back in. Replacement theology is so inerrant.
Another side to this as well. I mean, this rise in anti-Semitism. Yes, I think as David said, the Lord is using it to drive his people out and back towards the land. And this is also, in a sense, an evidence of God's mercy as well. He's in order to preserve them, even though judgment is coming. He's also, another side of this. He's also preserving people's lives by getting them out before things turn very, very dark.
It's a very good point, Andy, because many Jews left Poland because of the warning coming, and this is prior to even prior to Hitler coming into power, to the rise of the Third Reich. Many German Jews did not listen. They were very well off, and they were very prosperous.
They love us,
Yeah, we're Germans now, and unfortunately, but you're right. It was God's mercy to keep them away from them. They came to America. Unfortunately, sometimes they didn't get the best welcome by the UK government or our own government with Roosevelt, but they were able to get out before, and they were preserved. The seed was preserved, the seed of the Jewish people. Yeah, David, you mentioned Romans 9 to 11. I want to read this because Paul makes the case regarding their future. Their present condition is rebellion, their continual rebellion against the Lord and against the gospel. But he says, from the standpoint of the gospel, they are enemies for your sake, Paul says. But from the standpoint of God's election, they are beloved because for the sake of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. For the gifts of God and the calling of God are irrevocable. Another translation says without repentance. So God's calling and gifting of Israel. And from the standpoint of us today, they are anti the gospel. And you can see some of them very anti-Christian, very anti-Jesus. Although some of them have been very open now, and especially with things going on today. But because they remain as God's election, the nation remains God's election because of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I think a lot of Christians miss that point, that they don't go back into the history of the Old Testament, into the what the New Testament is founded on, which is the Old Testament.
Doesn't these reformers love that election stuff?
That's their claim. That's their claim to fame.
Don't they overlook that?
Well, they could be elected, but not Israel. That's really the.
So it means different things in different, the same word, different places, different meanings.
It cannot mean that for Israel. It cannot mean that only for them. So
irrevocable doesn't apply there.
It is interesting. We missed that verse. quite a bit. Go ahead, Jay.
Just a quick question to kind of clear the air. If we call Israel, which I don't disagree, Israel is in definite rebellion to the Lord's will. If Israel is in rebellion, what do you call mainstream Christianity?
Oof.
Yeah.
Even worse.
Yeah.
Carnal, you've got the whole spectrum. Carnal Christianity, in name only Christianity. You've got people can't distinguish between Mormons, Catholics, and real Christians. They have other Jesuses. It's the whole spectrum. It's only gotten worse since I was born again.
Yeah. I want to switch gears here because I want to talk about the news a bit, because we've seen what the protesters have done here in the U.S., in New York, the Met Gala, which is like I guess the Super Bowl of women's fashion. The protesters went out of the colleges and universities in that area, went into that. They bridged the gap. They went through the barbarians at the gate. They actually pierced through the barricades. And these are anti-Israel leftist riots. The new NYPD, I think it called a stage 3 mobilization, and it got pretty bad. Funded by Soros, hatred for the Jews, sympathizing with terrorism. Biden seems to be caving in on it. He begins to now halt equipment, military equipment for Israel. Jacob talked a lot about that in his hot take, but I want to talk about it here because I'm not surprised that he did that. But it's now open, naked, and blatant by people like Jake Sullivan and the Biden administration. And the halting of this was called illegal by the GOP. The GOP it was illegal. Many people say, well, that's not illegal. It was a take on when Trump didn't want to send weapons to Ukraine. The Dems call it illegal. Now the GOP saying this is illegal what you're doing, and they're drafting impeachment hearings and all this stuff that want to impeach Biden because of this. Quid pro Joe is what they call him. Quid pro Joe, because he's doing it to Israel. What they believe the GOP did to Ukraine. So Israel's at war. Hatred of the Jews is very big. You see it through the president of the United States, Joe Biden, halting military equipment, especially very specific ones, to Israel. So let's talk about that, because this is now 217 days since October 7th of 2023. 217 days since the hostages have been taken. 217 days. Nothing's been done. We don't know if the hostages are still alive. 132 of them supposedly are still there. Security cabinet. I'm sorry. We'll get to the security cabinet of Israel. But for now, let's just deal with the Joe Biden administration. What are they doing, and how does this play out?
Okay.
Andy, we'll start with you.
Well, maybe I'll work backwards from how this is going to play out. I mean, well, there are going to be at least two effects of this. Well, three effects actually. One, obviously, as long as the Democrats are in power in the US, there's no way we can ever trust the US. True. Because they will just do this to us whenever we step out of line from what they want. Two, it will force us to start to produce these kind of munitions locally here in Israel. When it's long overdue that happening anyway. And three, I don't think Bibi will stop the operation in Rafah. I just think we can't afford to. We can't let these guys rise up again. We've got to finish the job and get the hostages back if they're not already been murdered. So it can't be. I don't think this what Biden has done will be allowed to stop these operations. It might hinder things, and not having those smart munitions may increase the collateral damage among the civilian population if they don't get out of the area. But I don't think it will stop things ultimately. That's one take. That's four things. That was
David Lister.
Well, from what I heard, he's thinking about now stopping multiple shipments, not just this first one.
Yeah, actually, if you want to hear the latest, U.S. posits weapons shipments, so plural, but he also waives weapon purchase on the sanctions on Qatar, Lebanon, and Iraq. So on the one hand, pauses Israel. On the other hand, they waive the weapons purchase sanction on Qatar, Lebanon, and Iraq.
This is the God of confusion reigning over our government. It's good is evil, evil is good, and it's just terrible to see the only democracy in the Middle East that actually gives the vote and citizenship to people that actually hate them. I was in Nazareth, and all I saw were Palestinian flags.
Oh,
and
man.
Other places, and that are in there, and they're majority. And so you guys not only are surrounded, Israel is not only surrounded by enemy, but it has enemies within, you know. And the mindset of young people nowadays thinking they're doing something good with the Palestinians. I mean, they're not liked by even the Arab world.
No, we were talking about that, weren't we? Like Egypt doesn't allow them, Lebanon doesn't allow them, Jordan doesn't allow them, the Saudis don't allow people from Gaza. I wonder why.
Well, I'll give you a great example why. Kuwaiti felt so sorry for them, and so they invited 300,000 of them to their country. They invited them in, gave them jobs, gave them housing, gave them a living, gave them free education, free medical, because they're a very rich company. 300,000 of them. Well, some guy named Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. And guess who sided with Saddam?
No.
The 300,000 so-called Palestinians. And as soon as they got their country back, 3 weeks, 300,000 Palestinians back to their own land. So that's what they did to their brothers.
Yeah.
That's what they'll do to your country, you know. So it's already been tried, and everybody sends them back. Egypt is now making a bigger wall because they don't want them coming in. Not only the wall, but a bigger wall on top of that wall, so that these guys are Muslim Brotherhood. Okay?
Yeah, when they killed Anwar Sadat, did they remember that?
Yep. But see, you know, I've told some people about this, and they've never heard of Black September. They've never heard of the murder of, you know, the Munich massacre at the Olympics.
72, yeah.
Yep. And I said earlier, a few weeks back, that all these protests are going to rise up at every event from now till election day, at least. The Olympics, every place where there's live events and where they can get some coverage, you're going to see these activists, not just in America, but worldwide. I would not doubt that there's not going to be a big protest at the Olympics in France.
Oh, I could imagine.
To your point, David, one of the most disgusting things that I saw was Eurovision. Okay, now there's a lot of things wrong with Eurovision, but this one was pretty bad. There was a contestant from Greece. Now, Greece, World War II, they hid their Jews, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Modern day Greek girl, 20 years old, contestant. There's a Israeli contestant speaking, and what does she do? While the cameras are rolling, she pretends like she's falling asleep. There's the contempt.
Yeah.
So young people are deluded to this mass delusion.
They're bringing to their own destruction.
Yep.
You know who's supporting all these protesters and feeding them and giving them money and giving them all these things? It's the Rockefeller Foundation, Prickster from Illinois, and the Soros Foundation, Soros support, who by the way are also Biden supporters. So they give a lot of money to Biden. They're also supporting this. So in a way, the same supporters that uphold Biden and his regime are the same ones who are causing this. I mean, do they want a bloodbath in the Middle East? Is that what because Qatar is allied with Hamas, Lebanon with Hezbollah, right? And now they want to lift the sanctions on Iraq to purchase more weapons. So we're halting to Israel, opening it up to their enemies. This is open. This is open, blatant, naked attempt to abandon and attack Israel.
Yeah, they want to destroy us, don't they?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Biden is actively working towards that. Yeah, of wiping us out. Yeah.
And prophetically, we know Israel's going to be on its own in the end times. The only one they're going to be able to turn to is the Lord. The Lord is going to be, but that's going to be true for all of us. You know, the Lord is our refuge. He's our only hope. But that Jake Sullivan. Look, the responsibility for all that's going on lies at his
That's
feet.
right. 100%, Davey.
He's the one who funded. He's the one who funded Iran, who funded Hamas. That's where they got the money for the initial attacks. Now he's withholding military aid from Israel, military support for Israel. He's giving it to all their enemies. Ukraine just got another, I think it was something like $61 billion thing in military aid promised again. He's an evil man, and unfortunately he's bringing the judgment of God, on us in the West. Our leaders are.
But I saw this over in Japan too, man. The Japanese are talking about not supporting Israel. Everybody's turning their face to him, and I think there's a verse somewhere. I will bless those that bless Israel, and I will curse those that curse them.
Yeah.
Now here, Biden is caving into the protests and caving into the pressure of Congress. You got, of course, a Jew, a self-hating Jew, Bernie Sanders, Pelosi. You have Durbin. We're all promoting this idea. We support Israel. However, we're not going to give them anything. We support Israel, but we're not going to give you. We're going to give them to your enemies. Boy, if they love Israel, they really support Israel. But whatever they didn't, right? So
yeah, I'd hate to see what their hatred looks like if this is their support. Yeah,
100%. Now, Andy, does Biden want to make some kind of impact with the peace deal because he's trying to get the ceasefire?
There was an article to this effect in yesterday's Jerusalem Post, and we talked about earlier that it. I'll just find I got a few points down. It says that this is all a deliberate strategy. Apparently, in this article went on. Some kind of grand bargain for the Middle East, a dream scenario that includes irrevocable commitment to Palestinian statehood and end of conflict, large-scale Israeli withdrawal on the West Bank, and a formal Saudi-Israeli peace agreement that echoes the Abraham Accord. So in some cases, it looks like Biden's trying to reproduce Trump's success here, but also it said a bit farther on, it said that this process begins in Rafah through orchestrating a stalemate and ceasefire that will prevent Israel from totally defeating and uprooting Hamas and leaving it intact as the dominant Palestinian terror organization and de facto rulers of Gaza. And that's what this article was positing. But then it went on to say that in actual fact, far from creating peace, it will create more war and instability.
Oh yeah, for sure,
absolutely. And you can, and it will also, unless Hezbollah, if it prevents Hezbollah from being dealt with because we don't get the munitions or whatever, because people can't go home in the north of Israel, they'll be stuck.
Yeah.
And Hamas will have no reason to surrender, even less reason to surrender than it has at the moment. If Biden's rewarding their terror with crippling Israel militarily, and of course funding all their enemies, Iran, Hezbollah, Qatar, all these other things. So it's not. You can see there's an overall strategy here that's designed to destroy us.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Security Cabinet in Israel approved measure to expand into Rafah. So now they're in southern Rafah, right by we see the Egyptians don't want them there. So the continual trying to root out Hamas is going to try to be short-circuited by Biden. The Republicans seem to be impotent because they want to draw up some kind of impeachment hearings about this. I don't know if they're going to get anywhere. But I did want to talk about the north of Israel too. Andy, where you are. Yeah, what's up, David?
The news was running in the background this morning, and I think it was the government in Australia was talking in the early morning hours, maybe it was from yesterday, that they want to look towards a two-state solution.
Oh, yeah.
That's always their answer, isn't it? That's always their answer.
That's the answer. That's where it moves to, and of course Hamas wants all of the Jerusalem, including the Temple Mount and the old city of the Jewish quarter.
From the river to the sea. It was interesting. I was watching a video of this gentleman who was interviewing these protesters in New York, and he was asking them, "Hey, what's the chant from the river to the sea? What does that mean?" And all these young people were like, "It just means they want, human rights. They want the human rights." And I said, "Okay, yeah, that's good, but what does it mean from the river to the sea?" And they said, "Well, we don't know." And they were like, "Why are you chanting it?" Well, I just think it's more human rights for the Palestinians. And so you explain it to them.
F in geography.
Yeah. Does that mean that there is no room for a Jewish state? And it's, well, I don't think so. But he showed him on a map. He said, well, how far does this go? Where does the Jews live then? If it's from the river to the sea, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean. And these young kids couldn't answer anything, but they said, well, we don't know, but we want to keep chanting it. We don't know. We want to keep chanting it. This is as far as it's gotten. But the north of Israel, Andy, you're close by. Lebanon is having some activity there, according to a Lebanese report.
Yeah, we did hear some of that a few days ago. There was sounds. You hear these booms in the distance. Sometimes you can tell when they're our side, because there's a slightly different sound to artillery firing stuff than the stuff that comes in, So we heard quite a bit of that yesterday, and they were blasting some Hezbollah positions across the border. But as far as incoming stuff, Nahari has been very quiet. But thankfully, we've hardly seen anything. I don't crave that kind of excitement, I really don't.
I can't believe you would like to have a skill that you can tell in the different types of missiles fired at you or from you.
Yeah, well,
quiet would be better, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. It's just as far as at least there's a different sound to outgoing artillery than incoming. But
that community in Shlomi, that's not too far from you, isn't it?
It's about 5 kilometers away, about 3 miles. And there were a couple of hits on Shlomi. Yeah. That's what they were partly some of the were responses to that. But another fascinating thing I actually found out this morning. Right up what was the name of there's a Druze town you can see across the border from there, and they've never left. That they just didn't want to leave.
Wow.
And they're they just been looking after soldiers and things there, and they decided they weren't going to evacuate at all. And they're very positive about everything.
Interesting. Yeah, there was drone attacks. So there was drones that came from the Lebanese border into Israel. They were eventually shot down, but you can kind of see the danger in what Hezbollah, which has been rather quiet, but oftentimes it's like a snake, ready to pounce, ready to strike their deadly poison. And they've been rather quiet, but it seems like as they see Hamas being emboldened, as they see Biden holding back some efforts to help Israel, now they may be their time. I'm not saying they will.
This is a concern, actually, because if they see that, I don't know whether. Excuse me a second. I don't know whether these arms shipments that are being withheld, whether they include, the anti-missile munitions. I don't know for sure.
I know there were.
I don't know if it would go that far. Sorry.
Yeah, high payload munitions is what Lloyd Austin said. I don't really believe him on a lot of stuff, but I know there was the precision guided missiles for sure, and then some high payload munitions.
Yeah, they're very handy. It does help. Israel. Fire control systems are much more well developed since they were like World War II or something like that. You can really and Israel has a very good system for accurately delivering artillery shots and everything as well. With all the extra drones and surveillance coverage they have now, you can really pinpoint stuff, and that stuff is so, not just to preserve civilian lives, but also to make the best use of artillery ammunition. You don't have to waste so much. You can really put it right on where it needs to be, and it also saves the lives of soldiers as well, because they can wipe out something before they even have to move in there.
And civilians, because you can target military target and limit civilians in the surrounding area with these guided munitions and everything. So it
absolutely, which is what you're looking for. You're looking for.
I don't know if you've seen some of the footage. Sorry.
Is what everybody wants is limited deaths, but yet let's withhold it.
Yes, there is that as well.
Confusion.
If you've seen some of the footage, I saw about a couple of weeks ago, I saw this one of, there was this car that was coming out. It's obviously in the Lebanon, and it was obviously a target for Israeli. It had some Hezbollah leaders or something in it, and it was driving down the road, and there were other cars around as well, and this thing right on it, bang, and the car went up in flames, and that was the end of the Hezbollah commanders or whatever they were. But it was so accurate. Nobody else in the area would have got really seriously injured unless they were standing right next to the car. They just wiped it out. And you can't do that without the right kind of munitions.
Even our bombs, even the 500-pound, 1,000-pound bomb, they do have radio controlled, from what I understand, like wings on them, or tail wings.
Yes.
Guide themselves. Yes. So even those are important. So.
Yeah, I think we hit the hour mark. Have we hit the hour mark yet, Davey? Yeah, we did. Okay, so it's been an hour. It's been so much fun. You can hardly even feel the time, but it's been an hour. And I just want to remind everyone, welcome if you're watching live on YouTube and Facebook and Vimeo and Telegram and other platforms like Memorial TV, memorialtv.org. And thank you for watching, catching up with Jacob. Jacob's not here. He is in New Zealand. But we do have Andy. We have David Lister and Davey and Jay. And we will be going to backstage for some questions. So if you have questions on the related topics for Andy, David, you got limited time, so you may or may not be on for that. But
yeah, I got 15 minutes.
Yeah, so we gotta hurry through it. But I did want to mention this as we head toward our catching up and then go to backstage, is the rise of Islam in the West. The sympathy that many within let's say indigenous communities here in America and the UK specifically, and maybe Australia too, Davey, you can share some information here. Islam has lived peacefully for some time. They started coming in. I remember reading a book in the mid-90s about the rise of Islam in America. Now, Muslims have been around here for quite some time, but the communities. And I started hearing this idea that in Dearborn, Michigan, this is mid-90s, 93, 94, 95, in Dearborn, Michigan, there were already communities of Islam, and they had signs, street signs in Arabic, signs, stores in Arabic with their signs and things like that. So they didn't have the numbers at the time. And that was one of the things they were projecting. At the projected birth rate, they were going to have more power and they were going to have more voting rights and things like that. Once they have the numbers, in many cultures they've experienced this, once they have the numbers, they begin to expand into city councils and politics. Then they want rights. And if they don't get the rights, they begin to demand the rights, even to the point of violence if they don't get it. So a lot of young people here, we watched a couple of videos in UCLA of conversions to Islam by repeating the Shahada 3 times. There's a sympathy in the West that has come from the influence of Islam here. Students, protesters, media, all chanting or all appealing to this idea that Israel does not have right to the land. The Muslims do. And therefore, this increased Muslim population here in America, whether it's Minnesota, whether it's Michigan, whether it's New York or California, they're demanding more, just like in Germany, just like in France, just like in Belgium, just like in Sweden, and just like in the UK. So we'll start there. Andy, talk about the UK and some of the stats you sent me, some of the information you sent me was I didn't know that, and it was far-reaching. Some of these London mayors, other mayors that are Muslims.
Ah, yeah, that was that's
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I sent you and accidentally deleted my signal history. Oh dear, yeah.
No worry, no worry. Well,
Um,
we don't have to look at the
however,
stats necessarily,
yeah,
but
in
just
the UK,
the
excuse me a
influence.
second. I've just lost the Zoom for a second. Let me find. There we go. That's it. There we go. I just lost it, so I can't see your faces anymore. Right. Yeah, I mean, in the UK, you've got large tracts of. Of course, you've got London, which now has got apparently a Muslim majority. You've got Birmingham, huge. I mean, the Birmingham area is huge in the centre of the country, in the Midlands. You've got in the north, Leeds, Bradford, both big places in Yorkshire. Keighley now. I mean, you can see it just spreading out like a stain across. You know, it's very very concerning, especially if they're saying when you hear these spokespeople, these Islamic spokespeople saying that if you don't like it, you can always leave Britain.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing that these are
Yeah,
not just
the
ordinary people.
arrogance of it
People
all.
on the BBC, the political commentators on the BBC. One of them, Bushra Shaikh, I think she's Pakistani background. Other political commentators were saying, "Look, if the Brits don't like Muslims living in their country, then they better leave." The hubris. I mean, it's crazy to
Yes,
think like that. It's crazy to say
yes.
that, but I don't think there's been many complaints to remove her off the air.
Yes. I mean, if you got someone white saying that, there'd be an absolute riot. You
Can you
know,
imagine that? Yeah.
I seen a meme the other day. It said, it showed a white guy behind a desk, a government official, pointing at the Muslims saying, if you don't like Britain, you can get out, and that was like 1920 or I forget the date. And then it showed 1922. The same guy telling another Muslim guy, you don't like England, Britain, get out. And then it says 1928. It has the Muslim behind the desk pointing at the white guy saying, if you don't like Britain, you can get out.
Oh man. Several mayors. Now you
yeah,
mentioned actually, Andy, you have family members still in the UK. So
yes.
this
They're
is
not
something
very
that,
happy about it.
no, I could
They're not happy
imagine.
about it at all.
Yeah,
Um,
in Manchester, there's a large Jewish community, but you were informed there's a lot of Muslim community. There's a
Oh
big
yeah, right next door
community.
to it. Yeah. What happened in Manchester? I mean, it's very common. This, when the Jews first arrived in quantity in the Manchester area, they lived in very poor areas, Red Bank, Cheetham Hill, places like that. And of course, as they got more wealthy, they moved away from the inner city, towards places like Prestwich and goodness me, my mind's gone blank now. Bury and places like that. And of course, the new wave of immigrants came in, which was mostly Muslims, and they took a lot of the northeast side of Manchester, some of the south side as well. Oh my goodness, my memory of the suburbs of Manchester now is I'm losing it. I think really, it's been so long since I've been back there. But and so they're right next door to each other.
Hmm.
And you've got Jewish areas like Broughton Park and places like that, which is right, just above Cheetham Hill, where there's a very large Muslim population. I'm actually astonished so far there hasn't been some really serious anti-Semitic violence there. I mean, really serious. I'm talking, terror incidents here,
Yeah.
because the level of hate that's being stoked in the Muslim community is just getting bigger all the time. And the Jewish community is very, very vulnerable. I think and there's only about 45,000 Jews in total. I think. I mean, I'm not even sure there's that many in Manchester now.
Yes.
And there's a far, far bigger Muslim population. I mean,
Yeah,
really,
the what they call the state-supported Muslim families, which apparently there a lot of them do not work. A lot of them receive free state support, free accommodations, housing. Obviously, here in America, we call it welfare. I think they call it the dole, and in the UK, they're on the dole.
Yeah, social security. They call it also as another. Yeah.
Yeah. So 6 to 8 children per Muslim family. In the UK, it's probably 1 to 2, maybe 3 if it's a larger family. So it is soon going to bypass, certain communities. Definitely the Jewish communities bypass the Muslim populations, bypass them. And but do you think it's only a matter of time before the Brits are going to have to do something about this issue? Because I think the French have dealt with it, but I don't think they dealt with it well. The Germans, Belgium, I think they're facing that right now.
Well, plus Marco, the white population is aging and the Muslim population is young. So they'll outpace them there because of natural attrition. But like the birth rate will just accelerate. All they need is a majority. In fact, in many places, they don't even need a majority. They just need a plurality, because you have sympathetic people. Oh, I'll vote with this guy and he'll understand us and all that stuff,
Yeah, he'll leave us alone.
Yeah.
There is that. Yeah, another thing in Britain also is passivity.
Yeah.
Passivity, and people really don't like to be thought of as extreme or offensive, and it's a problem. Of course, and then you've got the problem with the younger generation coming up who are more pluralistic and really have no British culture ultimately, other than fish and chips.
Yeah,
that's that they've had it destroyed. They've had any idea of national pride eradicated from them, amputated, because of the educational system and leftist views.
Yeah,
so any idea of
I know they like football because Manchester United and Manchester City's still big, but it just seems like maybe bread and circus. It's almost like they're kept distracted from the real issues.
Yes, we know people over there. I mean, some that even Jews who just don't want to hear about it. They don't want to know. They put their fingers in their ears and just go la la la. They can't. They don't want to hear any of this stuff. What's going on? Because I think it's too upsetting. They're too comfortable, but that's very common among a lot of Brits, whether Jewish or not. They don't want to hear this. It's too distressing, and they don't know what to do about it. Also, because the political will doesn't seem to be there to want to solve this problem, because ultimately it would take something very, very radical. It would take mass expulsions of Muslims by hundreds of thousands, even if not millions. You'd have to
I don't think they're ready to do that.
I don't think it would. It would. You would end up, to some extent, you'd have to kiss goodbye to some of the problem is with the way that Islam is invading the West is it's playing on and using the democratic system against so, but in order to get rid of Islam, you really would have to also violate the democratic system, because you'd basically have to disenfranchise 4 million Muslims and deport them. That's the only way you would solve the problem, in a sense. It would be very, very undemocratic. And that goes against the grain, once you give that kind of power to the government, you say, look, let's suspend democracy while we deal with this Islamic problem. Governments have a very nasty habit of not giving that back again.
No,
democracy is under judgment. That's the problem.
Yeah. It is. Yeah.
There is no easy solution, of course, because the what's going to happen is you give power to the state, like you said, and they're not going to give that up. But at the same time, I don't know if they're ready to make those tough decisions, because Islam boasts about the weakness of the West, because it says we don't. Yeah, we don't treat people like this in the Middle East. It is what it is, and it's a regime, and it's a caliphate, or is a Sharia law, and they laugh at the West, the weakness, the impotence of the West, because they don't do anything. They seem to even vote for their own destruction.
Now,
Yes, and yeah,
I just wanted to say there is a very easy way you could use democracy to alleviate some of the problems, I think, in Great Britain. What do you think about in the Parliament getting enough of a majority to say we are cutting off social services to people that are chronically not working, chronically having more children? We're cutting off benefits to those that are not participating in the democratic society, which means having a job, being employed, being able to bear the tax burden that everyone else is.
yes. Yeah.
That I think
Well,
there would be self-deportation at that point.
Yes. Sadly, I think it would be fat chance of that even that happening. You know,
That's crazy.
I know.
That's crazy talk.
Yeah, that's how bad things are, and you know,
Because you have an
it
imploding
kind of
economic
makes you want to
system.
cry, really.
Yeah,
Sorry?
you have an imploding economic system, and
That's
unfortunately, when you get to that point, and there is a point of no return when you print so much money and quantitative easing that they call it, and the answer is always a war. The answer is always war.
yeah.
Hold on.
I think there'll be terrible civil violence in the West. I mean, far worse than what we're seeing at the moment. You know, where you'll have whole factions of within the you know, like even within Britain, even within the US. I think there'll be terrible civil violence. You know, and Britain's already falling apart at the seams. But yeah, I just don't know how it will be avoided. It'll either come from, you know, the factions fighting against each other, or a huge or the Islamic section of society just subjugating everybody else forcibly
Right.
at some
right.
point. I just don't. It might not happen tomorrow, but you know, 10, 15 years in the future, I don't think that's impossible. Because I don't see how this is going to be resolved unless, if the government isn't taking any action, something very nasty is going to happen soon. You know.
I always assumed or had heard that the UK loves bureaucracy. That, in fact, they love to do all sorts of bureaucratic things and make more positions. Why not? Why not make a bunch of positions that are nothing but caseworkers that determine, are you gaming the system or not? You know, you could create thousands of new jobs.
Oh, you would have thousands of jobs
for British
Yeah,
people.
The government and the civil service is already too big in the UK. They could.
We could expand it.
Really, it's very top. It's top heavy.
Government loves to expand it for sure. Do you guys ever heard that replacement theory? That I know people have said it's conspiracy and things like that, but the replacement theory is basically the idea that you bring in a population that's obviously not indigenous, and you bring them in from completely multicultural backgrounds, so it's a different culture, and you'll displace the native population there by causing trouble, and you know, it's this sort of cultural enrichment, you call it, where there is a diversity, but also a conflict within the cultures, and eventually the new I guess you would say the new population displaces the old one, and now you have votes that go toward the government that allowed it in. That's been touted in Europe. That's been touted here in the United States, that this is what they are doing. This is what the Democrats are doing. This is what the UK government is doing. The European Parliament is doing, to displace the indigenous population and replace it with people that basically can be controlled.
Yes, that's it. That's one of the things, isn't it?
They think they can
people
be
that
controlled.
Can be controlled.
That's the scary
Keep them
part.
ignorant, keep them stupid, keep them on benefits.
Yeah.
Don't let them get too clever. And yeah.
Well, you have this HR 7109 by Congress, who was trying to pass the fact that they wanted to give illegal representation in Congress and Electoral College. And this was voted down. Well, at least it was voted unanimously by the Dems, 202, nothing by the Republicans, 200, I think it was 19. And the so it didn't pass. It's going to go to the Senate to see if they pass a bill against that. But this is crazy. They're trying to pass a bill
Yeah.
that would give the non-indigenous population ability to have congressional representation and electoral college. This is exactly what, if somebody bought into the replacement theory, would say, well, see, this is exactly what's happening. They're trying to give power to non-indigenous population so they can outvote the indigenous population.
Yeah, try that in an Islamic country. Try that in reverse. It won't happen.
Oh. I saw a story last week where a bunch of Americans that have fled economic hardship in the United States went to Mexico to live. Mexico deported them.
Oh,
Wow, you must be bad to get deported from Mexico.
American retirees and expats were deported back to the United States because Mexico said, "Hey, you are changing the economy in our country. You're making the prices go up because you pay more for everything."
oh.
Well, that takes some doing. They can get deported from there. From a
Yeah,
cartel
it's a great point,
country.
Jay. It's a great point. I wonder if some of these Latin American countries that have received a lot of Americans have gone in there, and of course, obviously because of the dollar and the purchasing power, they have made prices go up. In this case, I went to Costa Rica. It's much more expensive. Chile and Peru, they claim the same thing. Definitely Mexico. So I wonder some of these governments are going to take a different approach now, Jay, on Americans coming in there.
No expats allowed. I mean, look at Japan. Japan is now falling into the replacement theory. For the first
terrible.
time in its history,
Wow.
they're letting people come in. And it's now they are actually having their homogenous society, which for the most part people love there. It's being challenged because you have factors of, just like you said, aging population, social burden from different programs. More in Japan, more people are buying adult diapers than diapers for babies. And they have to have these service level jobs. So who do you bring in? You bring in anyone you can. However, I think one of the few rational things Japan does is I do not believe they allow large-scale Islamic immigration into their country, unlike everywhere else in the West.
Everywhere else, yeah. I heard a lot of Indians are going in there, for people from India.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct, and that's causing a problem.
that's because, oh man, yeah. Well, the joys of multiculturalism,
Yes.
the fruits of it.
Yeah.
Really. I want to talk about the theological side of the Islamic issue that's been going on in the West and Europe and the West, Andy. The theological side, because of the rise of Islam, some believe that now in eschatology, that there definitely Islam will play a role to such an extent that the Antichrist will be a Muslim. Now, when I was a younger Christian, this is in the early 2000s, I heard a man named Walid Shubat who was talking about this idea, and he had written a book about it. He definitely spoke in a lot of different circles, that he espoused this idea. Now, supposedly he was an ex-PLO terrorist and all these things. He had a testimony. So they brought him out to say that, but he, along the way, said, look, I'm from the East side. We don't believe in the European type Antichrist or something like that. It's a Muslim Antichrist. And he gave his reasons. Other people like Joel Richardson has written a book on it. Another guy like Dr. C.K. Quarterman wrote a book from Daniel and Revelation that he concludes that it is an Islamic Antichrist. So I have heard their arguments, talk about certain things. Andy, I wanted to hear from you. What's your take on that? It's definitely gaining popularity because of the rise of Islam. And we tend to sometimes, and the church has done this many times, we tend to look at
The current
theology or
bogeyman.
eschatology, depending on your surroundings and
Yeah.
what's going on.
Yes.
I remember in the 80s, everybody said it was going to be a Soviet Union Antichrist. And there were
Yes.
people that promoted that idea. So it's not new, but I just want your take on it. The Islamic Antichrist. What's your take on that?
Well, there are some. It's a while since I looked at this, but
No worries.
I mean, to me, I forgot what I was going to say now. I would tend to go with the Antichrist actually trying to mimic the prophecies that, the messianic prophecies. In other words, to pass himself off as the Jewish Messiah.
Right.
To me, that, and I really, that doesn't really gel with me, that this idea of an Islamic Antichrist, because I don't think it really fits the evidence. I mean, this is just an opinion, because
correct, yeah.
Scripture does not really tell us specifically. So anything that you're to some extent speculating. But if you think, for example, that you look at, say, the land promises, the rebuilding of and there are certain things within rabbinic Judaism, the rabbinic tradition, that like the laws of kings of Maimonides, laws of kings. There are certain things that the rabbinic Jews expect the Messiah to do. One of them is to rebuild the temple. One of them is to destroy Israel's enemies. I can't remember all of them now. It's a while since I looked at this, but what the rebuilding of the temple was considered to be one of the major signs that this person, if this person succeeded in doing that they would be the Messiah from a rabbinic perspective.
Right.
And it's very hard to imagine actually an Islamic leader wanting to do that, especially with this, when you see what Islam is like today.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons that some people that push back on that theory is that they say, well, how can Israel follow an Islamic Antichrist, where it is in their writings, in the Quran and the Hadith, to not make friends with Jews, not make friends with Christians, not make friends with any of them, and it actually calls for violence against them. So how could they do that? So that's one of the reasons why people don't contend with that theory. It's because of that.
Especially when you look at Israel today, I mean, what are all our enemies? The ones that want to wipe us out, repeatedly say they want to kill us all. They're nearly all Islamic-led nations. So that kind of makes you think, well, they don't have Islam does not have our best interests at heart, particularly when you've got verses in the Quran that say, that the trees and rocks will say, look, there's a Jew behind me, come on, kill him, Muslim, and that kind of stuff. So I think that seems unlikely to me.
Right, because the nations, one of the points that those proponents of that is that the nations around Israel are Islamic, and therefore, if there's going to be an antichrist, a figure that comes in, it's going to have to be a Muslim.
Yeah, another thing that I think we were talking about this a couple of days ago. I mean, this is speculative, so please don't take this as gospel. But I would expect for example, the rebuilding of a temple, or a Jewish sanctuary of some kind, even if it was the beginning of the sacrificial system, to require to some extent a surge in religious feeling.
Oh, for sure,
in this country,
for sure,
and to facilitate that, and. What was I going to say now? I knew I was going somewhere with this point, but I hate it when that happens.
All right, wait, you get it back, and I just mentioned something.
Okay, else. And this is it. This is the thing. We often think, like, that the temple might be rebuilt in a sense of, we've had this idea that, it's built out of a sense of complete rebellion against God, in a sense, rebellion against the gospel. It's Israel hardening. It's how they build this temple to try and justify themselves. There's that kind of overall kind of leaning that many Christians have about this. But in one sense, it could come about on the back of a kind of a good faith motivation within Israel. They begin to see, basically conviction starts to happen, and they begin to realize their national need, but yet have not, but don't yet embrace, but are not yet ready to embrace the gospel. There is that side of it.
Right.
That's a possibility, I would think, and because that would give you also a remnant that is genuinely searching for the truth, but has not yet found it. And that's a situation that you have in the book of Revelation. You've got the 144,000 who at that point don't appear to. I mean, the fact that they have to go through the day of the Lord tells you that they're protected against the judgments of the day of the Lord, but they're not actually raptured. So that makes you think, well, that they're probably not regenerate at that point, because Israel doesn't really come to national salvation until the end of the 70th week as well. So, there's a lot of things that make you, sorry, I'm just throwing these things out there,
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of, well, that's definitely a hot topic in terms of Islamic Antichrist, because of the surrounding things that we're dealing with and the rise of Islam, especially in the West. But just in the whole subject of eschatology, there's always been speculation and things like that, and that's what some people don't like to get into. But there are some clear markers in Scripture, clear evidence of Scripture, and people are starting to see, because of the rise of anti-Semitism, the rise of AI and technology, and troubles in the world, war, rumors of war, all these things, people are genuinely thinking, well, maybe we are heading toward these days. And some people have gone too far, in my opinion. They speculated that the seals are open now, and you hear some of the other stuff we talked about last time you were here, in terms of date setting, and it was going to be on this day, and eclipses, all these things that really cloud the whole point of it, and none of it more seen in the rapture. Andy, the ideas about the rapture. So let's unpack that a little bit, because much controversy within pre-trib camp and mid-trib and post-trib and all these ideas, and yet there seems to be this notion that, well, doesn't matter, we're going to be out of here soon anyway, so why discuss it, why talk about it? And are we setting up believers for a great disappointment? Well, we don't talk about it, we don't deal with it, and it's just going to work out.
Yeah. Oh, I hope that it doesn't work out that way, but I think many believers are going to get a very nasty surprise, they are. But the church is being set up. There's the united testimony of the. I mean, they didn't get everything. They didn't agree on everything. But the early church had the immediate post-apostolic church had certain things that they've had some minor differences on different things in eschatology. There were certain things they were absolutely united on, and that was one that the Antichrist would appear and the tribulation would occur before the believers were taken away, and the resurrection of the dead would happen. All the church would suffer. They specifically say in several places that the church will suffer under Antichrist, and that and also the second coming spoken of in Matthew 24, 29 to 31. That also what included the catching up of the saints.
Right.
Not in it. That there was no mention ever. I mean, in the early church of any kind of secret or coming that would precede that spoken of in Matthew 24, 29 to 31, where immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be darkened, etc. There was nothing, that's what they looked for, not some secret coming, and that was the united testimony of the post-apostolic church up until, Augustine turned up.
Right. And so they believe what we would call a rapture that would happen before the day of the Lord.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. They
Well,
believe the rapture before the day of the Lord. And the way they define the day of the Lord will be just God's judgment on the earth, obviously, as the scripture proclaims. But this God's judgment will not happen until certain things took place. And I think that's Second Thessalonians chapter 2.
Yes. The parousia, the coming of Christ, would be preceded by certain events, which of course is, it's interesting. I'm just actually writing something at the moment, responding to someone over here who was claiming that everything was all nice and everyone agreed nicely, and then pre-Roth came along and just broke everything. And when I started to look at this argument of this person, I thought, this is complete nonsense. This is not what happened. It's completely the opposite.
60 years from when the last apostle died, everything just went every different direction. Polycarp was dead, everything. There was so much heresy coming into the church. It was ridiculous.
Yes, but I'm sorry. I'm just talking specifically about eschatology here. Yes, there was a lot of stuff that came in. But the eschatological testimony concerning the things I've mentioned, that was solid, and okay, there was Augustine came along and premillennialism kind of died for a while, but pre-trib is the one that came and upset the apple cart, and it overturned everything. All those things, pre-tribulation denies specifically. They deny a single second coming of Christ. They put an extra one in that has to happen secretly 7 years before the one spoken of in Matthew 24. They've got no biblical support for it, but that's what they do. They deny that the church will suffer under Antichrist. They deny that the resurrection occurs when Christ returns in the clouds. All this kind of stuff. It's a complete denial of the apostolic and post-apostolic eschatological testimony. They just upturn it all, So, yeah.
No, and you've been really good about refuting some of this stuff, Andy. Like, because you on your YouTube channel. So I encourage people to go to the YouTube channel, listen to some of the videos you made, and obviously on Twitter too, because Doctrine Matters. Because there's confusion about the rapture. There's confusion about, I think I was listening to a gentleman named Lee Brainerd talked about he wants to.
Lee Brainerd, yes.
Because he says he wanted to. What was that video called? It's something about debunking or something like that.
Yes. I'm actually been looking through I've not gone completely through the transcript yet, but some of the arguments they bring up, they're always these kind of secondary things. For example, the kind of argument is like, for instance, Lee Brainerd was referring to the 24 elders in Revelation chapter 5, and where in the authorized version, it talks about, the living creatures around the throne and the 24 elders. Excuse me a second. They fall down before the Lamb, and I think in the King James it says, for you were slain and redeemed us to God through your blood, from every tribe and tongue and people and nation, and redeemed and made us to God kings and priests, and we shall reign forever and ever. That's how it reads in the authorized version, or something like that.
Right.
Now, and he says, oh, well, this must mean that these elders represent the church, because they're and that means that the church is already in heaven. Therefore, the rapture must be pre-trib. They ignore the absolutely specific statements and explicit statements in Revelation. They just come up with this. It's kind of, but and Lee Brainerd presents this as a major argument for pre-trib, but there's a problem with it because of the underlying Greek text. I mean, the authorized version, they used a Greek text of Revelation that was like no earlier than the 12th century. And basically there are textual issues with these two verses. In the earliest Greek texts, for example, it says in verse 10, and you have made them to God, to our God, kings and priests. And there is some issue with the word us in where it talks about, and you were slain and has purchased, for or redeemed for God by your blood. The word us is missing in some of the.
Is it in italics in the authorized version? Is it in italics, or is it they just?
No, I don't think so in the authorized version, but the word us is missing in some of the earlier. The early Greek manuscripts. There's not a lot of manuscripts that have revelation in them, actually.
Right.
So the textual base is quite small. But the thing is, look, if there's any doubt about a text, or it's you shouldn't be basing your doctrine on it. If there's something that maybe that where there's something ambiguous or obscure, you should never make that a cardinal point of doctrine on it, because it's not a good idea. It really isn't, because if there's a possibility, it could be read both ways, or the text is unsure. That should never be a pillar of your doctrinal system. But this goes to show how desperate pre-tribs are. They are desperate to find anything they can to support their theory. This is why you get all the nonsense like
that. I think we had a question like that, David. You recall that for Jacob about Revelation chapter 5, and he was going to come back and address that issue. I think it was last week or the week before. But yeah, go on, Andy. I'm sorry, it just reminded me right now of somebody had the exact question of why does it say us and other translations don't.
Yeah, this is down to the underlying Greek text. The Textus Receptus, which is a late text, even has the wording as in the authorized version, but the earlier Greek text of Revelation, it's not. They don't. Well, there's actually they don't quite agree amongst themselves.
Right.
There are issues with the text that make it something that you wouldn't want to make this your chief pillar of your position. Put it that way.
Correct. Yeah. I think the video is called Demolishing Pre-Wrath. I think that's what it's called by Lee Brainerd. Demolishing Wrath. He was presenting these different arguments.
I mean, that's just the textual argument. I mean, that's problematic there. But also, when you see, for instance, within if the church is already in heaven, supposedly, then why doesn't the text simply show a huge multitude which no man can number? Well, because it does a few chapters later on.
Yes, it does. Chapter 7.
So, but pre-tribs will claim that is the tribulation saints. But if the tribulation saints can appear like that as a huge number, then why can't supposedly the pre-tribulational raptured church appear as a huge number? Doesn't So there's inconsistency there, and of course, then you've got the four living creatures are also singing that God, that Christ has redeemed them by His blood. Well, so it's a bit messed up, then, isn't it? You can see there's lots of inconsistencies with this thing, but it's like everything else. They try to stretch things and twist things. And this is the same with the apostasy equals rapture nonsense of Thomas Ice.
And Second Thessalonians. Yeah, Second Thessalonians.
It's pathetic.
Did Thomas Ice write a book with Andy Wood? Is that what I understood? I think Davey told me that. He wrote a book with Andy Wood. I think it's called The Kingdom or something like that, Davey. You recall Thomas Ice and Andy Wood?
Thomas Ice and Andy Wood. Gosh, I think they did. I'd have to double check what it was on
Yeah,
again.
if you could look it up real quick. Yeah, if you could look it up real quick. I don't want to,
Yeah.
I don't speak out of turn, but I think he did. But it comes back to the point, Andy, about Thomas Ice. The no sign needs to be there in order for the rapture to happen. There'd be no sign. So it's the next event, basically.
This book, I must rush out and buy it. Not.
Myself to give you the coming kingdom, how the kingdom now theology is changing the focus of the church. And it is by Andrew M. Woods, and a foreword by Thomas Ice.
Oh, there you go.
Wow.
That's the one. Thank you, Jay. Yeah, so there's lots of confusion. This demolishing pre-wrath, these arguments that as you develop them, Andy. But there's also confusion on Israel that we talked about earlier, right? Does it have a prophetic purpose for God has a prophetic purpose for them? Doesn't he? Does he? And lots of question because people want to know what's going to happen to the Jews. They see the persecution, and I like the argument you gave me about at least a post of Alan Kirshner about post-millennialists.
Oh yes,
and pre-trib. You want to talk about that real quick? That was well.
That's another thing that got on my chat history that I sent you. It's got lost. I've even lost the reference for that. I mean, Signal just completely blew it all away. It just
Signal,
went.
Not like you. Yeah, Signal.
Yeah, it doesn't like me at all. It's never happened before, but it just wiped out my entire.
Can I read it to you?
For about 3 years. Yes, please.
Can I read it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll read it to you. Postmillennialism believes that the Great Tribulation was for the Jewish tribulation saints in the past in 70 AD.
Oh yeah, the preterist argument. Yeah.
Pre-tribulationism believes that the Great Tribulation is for the Jewish tribulation saints for the future.
Oh.
You want to tell us what that means? If somebody doesn't know what that means, what is he trying to say regarding postmillennialism and pre-tribulationism?
Well, the postmillennial thing, of course. A lot of postmillennialists, in fact, they're preterists as well. So they believe that the events of the tribulation happened, and the day of the Lord, and all of that happened around AD 70. They've already happened. Christ has already come. In fact, the full preterists will say the resurrections happened as well already, and all kinds of stuff like that. So, so in other words, if the tribulation's already happened, then what happened to those Jews who were around in AD 70? They were the Jewish tribulation saints.
Yeah,
of course. The if
the Great Tribulation happened, it happened to those Jewish saints in 70 AD.
Yes, yeah. And so, I thought that's very good what Alan said there, actually. Of course, they also try to label the pre-tribs will try to label the Matthew 24 as applying just to either national Israel or these Jewish pre-tribulational saints that they've concocted. So, of course, that way they can avoid it having anything to do with the church, because, of course, they don't want they have to push Matthew 24 away like that, because otherwise it would mean that their pre-tribulational rapture theory was completely contradicted by the text, the plain meaning of the text. So they come up with all kinds of pretexts to dispose of Matthew 24. Interestingly enough, there are groups over here. Well, there are groups of pre-tribbers who try, and I've probably mentioned this before, they'd like to have their cake and eat it. That they want the bit in Matthew 24 that says, that after the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be darkened and the moon shall not give her light, etc. And then the Son of Man shall appear, the sound of the Son of Man shall appear, and then the Son of Man shall gather up his elect from the four corners of the earth. Well, they don't want that to be anything to do with the church, of course, because that's got tribulation in it, and it happens after tribulation. So that must be the glorious coming, the second glorious coming of Christ. But they so like that bit where it says, "No man knows the day or the hour."
It's in the same chapter,
that's
right?
imminence, isn't it? We like imminence. Imminence is important to them, so they want Matthew 24 verse 36 onwards to be talking about a separate rapture, a separate second coming, a separate coming that's secret and hidden, and where people are snatched away, like in the Left Behind series.
Right.
They try to have both in, but unfortunately, the problem is that the same Greek word parousia, it appears all the way through the text, even after verse 36, and it's obvious when you look at it that Matthew 24 verse 36 is looking back and explaining how the events of verses 29 to 31 will occur in regards to those people who are not ready.
Right.
So this is
even the word episunagog is there too, right? Isn't the gathering together from 2 Thessalonians 2? There is a similar word that Jesus is using.
Yes, there is. There is. Yes.
Of his saints. So on the one hand, it's parousia. It's all over the place there. Absolutely. On the other hand, too, there's also episunagage, which we all would agree that has to do with our gathering together with the Lord. And
yes, it's slightly different Greek word in when it talks of gathering in Matthew 24, but it's a related word from the same kind of root. I could probably actually look it up actually, but
no, definitely. So I think it's interesting that quote from Bible Prophecy Daily, because Jewish tribulation saints, they both will say it's always for the Jewish tribulation saints, the great tribulation. It's always for them. It's never quite for anybody else.
Yeah, and the evidence they have for trying to make it appear that it's only affects the Jews, Matthew 24, is so slim. I mean, a lot of it is based on the fact that it talks about pray that your flight won't be on the Shabbat or during the winter. That really often is it. That's it from what I've seen. That's Jewish, so they must only be speaking to Jews. But all the way through Matthew 24, his disciples are addressed in the second person all the way through. It doesn't say, So this is another weird thing about it, because he's speaking to his disciples directly and saying, watch out for the false prophets. You beware when you see the abomination of desolation. Then and pray that your flight. So he's addressing them personally. But so in a sense, when pre-tribs are effectively claiming then that when Jesus is speaking to his disciples, they are representatives of Israel. So from verse 20, Matthew 24 verse 1 onwards, they've suddenly switched from being
believers,
if you want to call representatives of the church. All of a sudden now they're representing national Israel until they get to verse 36, and then they switch back again to being representatives of the church. It's just gymnastics with the text.
Yeah, you know what? Let's just say, I when I was a young Christian, they taught me, hermeneutics, how to interpret the Bible and things. Like there were certain things that I had to adhere to. I couldn't come up with wild speculations. I had to adhere to, the rules that they gave me in terms of how to interpret the text, text, context, other co-text, right? And it was interesting. If you were to just look, if you don't have any particular view of it, and if you were just going on basic hermeneutical tools that you learn as an early Christian, you would have to conclude that in order to stay consistent, if it meant this in this passage, and especially in the same chapter, and then it means the same thing in the rest of the passage. So it has to be believers. It is addressing believers. Nowhere does the text even allude to or even hint at the fact that he's not talking to any other person but believers.
Yes. And you can see the way that he uses the word elect. I mean, it talks about gathering his elect, but earlier on, he's, of course, pre-tribs will claim, the elect, that's Israel, because they're the elect nation. But when you look earlier on in the chapter, it talks about, being on the watch for false prophets, because they shall do signs and wonders that even the elect might be deceived. And of course, when you look a bit further back, he's talking about again, it's always you, and he's talking about them enduring tribulation for Christ's name's sake. So it's not national Israel. It can't be. The elect must be the same people who are suffering for his name's sake. And that's not national Israel.
I agree with you, Andy.
It's crazy. It's crazy stuff, but they'll push it and push it and push it. And of course, when Paul writes about the very same things, he's obviously drawing from the Olivet Discourse. You can see this. I think Alan Gershon noted 30 correspondences between the two. When you have that many correspondences, it's statistically extremely unlikely that they're talking about different events.
No, it is very clear. Just on the surface, just looking at Second Thessalonians on the surface, it talks about the very same themes.
It does. Yeah, throughout Paul's message. Yeah,
correct. And there's no doubt that the epistles are always the eyeglasses, or you could call it the prisms. You call it the view of the frame of the gospel. So whatever Jesus taught, it's you want to learn, you want to understand it. Read what Paul said about it, specifically in those two letters. Eschatology makes a lot of sense when you see it through the lenses of what the apostles understood Jesus said, and obviously inspired writers. So I think it's important. David, you got something?
Look, I just wanted to mention to everybody too, getting back to the Islamic Antichrist subject. I highly recommend, and we'll repost them on Moriel TV in the next day or two. Jacob did a conference last November in the UK where he basically he taught on Daniel, and he looked at the rise of Islam, but he also did a thing called the comparison of the European Antichrist versus an Islamic Antichrist. It's extremely good, very thought-provoking, and it made me actually relook at the subject. So we'll repost them for you, so they're easy to find. And I highly recommend you watching them if you want to know more about that too.
Very good. Yeah, so they'll be up. They'll be up soon. Thank you, David. Thank you for that. I know it's getting late, Andy, and we're going to take questions. So we're going to pass on the what's going on in the church with already gone. I think it's a subject we do need to address it. This is based on the book by Answers to Genesis, and not only them, but just in general, the church is very much aware that not only adults leaving the church, but young kids, teenagers and kids are leaving the church. And I did read the book Already Gone by Ken Ham. This is years and years ago. I think it came out like maybe more than 10 years ago. And but we are losing our children. A lot of it is confusion. A lot of it is bad teaching. A lot of them is we don't teach them, apologetics and how to defend the faith and understand the Bible, inerrancy, infallibility. A lot of it is hypocrisy. The church doesn't practice what it teaches. And there is apostasy and bad teaching in the church, and unfortunately kids get caught up in that, and they see churches like the Methodist Church getting into LGBT, and so they go, well, how does the church handle this? And so they see a very divided church. They themselves have been taught, young kids have been taught by secular humanism and a lot of bad things in schools and sometimes in churches. I hate to say that they are more lenient toward LGBT and abortion and things like that. So they don't like to see, they don't want the church. They don't like the church. So many times they leave. I think it's a subject we need to address. It's going to take some time to unpack that. So we'll leave it at that. But I did want to ask you one thing before we go into questions is the Gog and Magog scenarios. It brings up a lot of confusion. There's a lot of questions, and there's actually a thing going around the eschatological internet and circles like that, where they say there's going to be a false one, and then there's going to be a true one. And the false one is because the Jews have a Gog and Magog in their eschatology, and Muslims have a Gog and Magog in their eschatology. And so what people have concluded, there's going to be a false one, and it's going to bring about the Antichrist. This false one is going to be put together in a sense of wars and nations going at each other, and out of that will come the Antichrist who brings peace. But then the real one is the one in Revelation chapter 20. interesting, thought provoking. But your quick take on Gog and Magog, and on a personal level, I know we don't have time to develop it, but we know that there's one in Revelation 20 for sure. That's the one that the New Testament speaks about. But much speculation if there's going to be another one before Jesus comes.
Oh, right. You want? Oh, me. Okay.
Yes.
The two main things I think that just give me a second. I'll just get my I just did some notes on this actually, just very brief notes. There are two things that speak against that there being any kind of Gog or Magog scenario before the Revelation 20. And one there is in Ezekiel 36. I'll just get that up. Just get it up. Sorry, 38. Sorry. Let me just find that. 38. There we go. Okay. That's 37. Back a bit. Where it talks about the children of Israel after the Gog and Magog war. It says that they will not profane the name of the Lord their God anymore. Now, for this to happen, obviously, if you have a Gog and Magog scenario before the 70th week of Daniel, for example, well, the 70th week of Daniel at the midpoint, with the cooperation of some within Israel, Antichrist will be worshipped in the temple. That's the worst blasphemy and profanation of God's name that probably will ever be in recorded history.
Right.
So that instant, just that point alone means that the Gog and Magog cannot happen before the midpoint of the 70th week. The second one is where it talks about Gog wanting to invade on a land that is peaceful and has dwelt peacefully for a long time, and where there's no more walls, no more fortresses, no more walled villages, and everything like this. It talks about. Well, there's that also is no place, nowhere in the 70th week would that be, really. The only place that really kind of fits, that kind of peacefulness for Israel, I mean, for a long period of time, is after, the day of the Lord is finished and Israel is dwelling at peace. And of course, also you've got the specific reference to this very thing, to Gog and Magog in Revelation 20. I mean, but that the thing about profaning the name of God, that to me it's the thing that really clinches it. I think more than I think it makes it impossible for that to happen before the end of the 70th week.
Very good, very good. I like that. I like that, Andy. So thank you for that. I mean, I know it's crazy. It is coming around quite a bit because they see Iran. They see Turkey, they see these nations surrounding Israel and coming in, and obviously it is a projection. They're projecting that, okay, it's going to happen now, and some say, well, what happened again at the end of the millennium and things like that. So it is quite a milieu of opinions of what exactly is going to happen. But I think the controversy, I think will be settled if we let Scripture deal with it, right, and then. Any speculation after that we can consider speculation, but what the scriptures didn't, the scriptures really straightforward that there will be one at the end of the millennium, and I hold to that. There will be one at the end of the millennium.
Yes.
The other one, it's speculative.
Yes, it is. I mean, I think with the evidence in Ezekiel 38 and 39, I think that has to refer to the events of Revelation 20. I don't think there's any other way that you can do. You'd have to take serious liberties with the text to make it fit something else.
Yeah,
because of those 2 points I raised, I don't think it's credible to happen another time.
Okay, very good. All right, so we're gonna conclude catching up right now, Andy, but we do have some questions. So we're going to switch over to backstage, and we won't be on YouTube or Facebook. We'll be on the other platforms, specifically Rumble. We take the questions from Rumble, and we're going to ask these questions, and we'll do the best we can. We're going to separate the ones that were from last week for Jacob and go straight forward to the ones that are for today. And obviously, there's no problem if there's something that we don't know, because we've taken questions like that before. As a hit, we don't even know what that is. We don't know who these characters are. We haven't seen that movie, or we haven't read that book, and we said, well, we'll find out more later. So there's always that. So we appreciate you being with us, Andy. So we're going to hold on for just a few minutes. We're going to make that switch over. Jay's going to switch us over to that, and we'll get to answer the questions. So we appreciate everyone who has been watching in live, and we'll watch later. We're here with Andy. We're here with Davey. We're here with Jay. David Lister was with us earlier, but he had to leave as he's in New Zealand. And we will be switching over to backstage for some really, really good questions. I could see them. So let's hang on to our hats.
Oh, you're watching it on Rumble, are you, right now?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So
oh, wow.
That's a lot of fun. All right. God bless you guys. We'll see you in just a few minutes. All right, welcome to Backstage, the part of the program in which our tech overlords do not let us talk about certain things. And so we're not on Facebook and YouTube. So we're on the other platforms, and we thank those who sent the questions. Always appreciative of your questions. We love them, and we do the best we can to address them. Jacob's not here, so we're going to hold those questions from last time when Jacob comes back. But we do have Andy here. Andy, thank you so much. It's been a really fun episode, and we thank you so much for being with us all the way from Israel. And it is late for you, so we don't want to make you stay up late. Maybe too bad already. Sorry.
Too late. That's already happened. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have Jay, and we have Davey, and we have the questions. So let's get started on the questions. Andy, what are your thoughts on John Mark Comer? He promotes Dallas Willard and into spiritual formation.
I've never heard of this guy, but I know about Dallas Willard, and he's a mystic. He came out with a lot of nonsense some years ago about how studying the Bible is not profitable, and all kinds of stuff like that. It's a while since I looked at him, but Dallas Willard is one of the seminal influences behind false apostle Daniel Juster over here.
Ooh,
and some of his he often quoted Dallas Willard favorably, Willard was also connected. I think Willard got some of his a lot of his ideas from Richard Foster, Celebration of Discipline. He was very connected with him. All the same kind of thing. So if you find someone that's influenced by Dallas Willard, run away screaming. I would say you're just basically getting repackaged Richard Foster, and which of course is repackaged Catholic mysticism and all kinds of other occultic stuff. I'd just stay very clear of anything to do with that.
Yeah, I did want to just attach something to what Andy says, because I don't know too much about necessarily Comer. I don't know him personally, but I have dealt with some believers that were dealing with some of this stuff, and they did tell me right away that this guy is a mystic. You're absolutely 100% right, Andy. And if you go to the website, it's called Practicing the Way. It is really a mystical approach and discipline of the Christian life, very similar to Richard Foster. And you're right, it has a lot of echoes to that book that he wrote long ago, Richard Foster,
Celebration of Discipline.
Yeah, which is basically Thomas Merton, which is basically Catholic mystics. And Dallas Willard is a big part of what Comer talks about. So what I was by going to the website, and people can go on and Practicing the Way, in the books, they talk a lot about rhythm and discipline and having this sort of practicing disciplines in order to get closer to God and have some kind of spirituality. What I was told by the believers who dealt with this issue is stay away from it. You're absolutely right, 100%, Andy. And by myself going and looking at it, you can tell that there's a lot of spiritual formation, mysticism, and of course, it reminds me so much of the repackage of the emergent church that happened early, 2006, 2007, and it fizzled out a little bit, but it still has some remains. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, there's a guy over here. I mean, he used to be part of the Tikkun. He was actually CEO of Tikkun over here, but he went recently. He started doing some theological degree work at that place. It used to be a Gateway Church. They have their own seminary now. You know, what's the guy that tithe? What's he called? That guy who says tithe or you'll get a demon. What's his name? The pastor of that church, anyway. You know the one, Robert Morris. That's it. Yeah. Anyway, this guy Ron Cantor has been doing his some of his theology work there at the seminary, and you know, he's coming out with all kinds of mystical stuff, quotes from, you know, like Teresa of Avila or whatever it is, and Catherine of Siena and stuff like this.
Yeah.
So you see it a lot on his blog. Ron Cantor, he's also the head of God TV over here now, but he's got increasingly more mystical as the months have gone by. You can see the stuff he's coming out with. So yeah, stay well. And in fact, they actually translated Celebration of Discipline about a couple of years ago into Hebrew. Unfortunately,
oh boy,
it wasn't Tikkun that did it. I don't think it was another company that was contracted to do it, but they should have stayed well clear of that.
Yeah,
but unfortunately, that's now in Hebrew as well. So that's another more dose of poison to poison the body over here.
That's right. So practicing the way, no good, and celebration of discipline, obviously no good, and some of the stuff is in Tikkun. I did not know that, so that's very, very interesting. Thanks, Andy. Andy, what Bible commentaries do you use, or do you recommend? There are so many.
I don't use an awful lot because I have what I found very handy, just because what I do find quite useful are these things are very useful. I find these are handbooks on the Greek text. I really like these very much. They're called actually a pre-commentary because they're a bit more. They help if you like reading Greek. I don't have a lot of commentaries actually because I just don't. I tend to. I use Logos sometimes. You know the Logos Bible software. I use the online version because I have a Linux system, so I can't. It doesn't run Windows and it doesn't run Mac software, so I can't run Logos as an installed application. So I just use Logos Bible software online, and I do have access to some commentaries there, but I don't use them a lot. Because I just, you know, I just read a lot of Bible instead, or at least a lot, you know.
Yeah, very good. So that's.
I'm not saying good commentaries are bad. Commentaries are very helpful, actually, sometimes, especially if because they give you access to other opinions about something when you're musing on something.
Yes.
It's very useful to have them. But they're all. I like the more technical ones on the whole. You know that.
There's some really good ones on Logos. There's the New American, I think it's called the New American Bible Commentary. I found that it's pretty straightforward. It doesn't deal with a lot of speculation. It deals with the text. It deals with and so I find that very helpful. If it helps anybody, the New American Commentary, it's decent. I haven't found anything in particular that it's crazy or way off. Then again, I haven't read all their books. Because they have all the books of the Bible in a commentary form. But to your point, Andy, it is very technical to a degree. It is made for, pastors and study guide leaders and things like that. But it does deal with the text and how to interpret the text, not giving you the answer like necessarily or their own opinion. It just tells you this is what the text says. This is what is drawing from other scriptures. And so it leaves it very straightforward, and I think that's a place to start.
A good series of commentaries actually are the Baker exegetical commentaries.
Oh yeah,
again, they are more common. They are more technical, and it does help if you've got some knowledge of how the original languages work. But I mean, they're very helpful. I go for that more. I prefer that kind of commentary more than the other ones.
Okay, very good. Andy, do you see Israel being forced into a peace agreement against their will versus joyously claiming and accepting a peace agreement?
I mean, are we talking about in the distant future, the near future, something to do with Joe Biden or something?
I think it just
Uh,
says a peace agreement. There's no context behind it. Just more of a peace agreement being
it's difficult
joyfully or forced.
without some context. I mean, in the near future, like to do with the prosecution of the current war, I I don't see our government caving into that one because one, we've got to get the hostages back, and two, and the population will not accept that not happening. And what was the second reason now? My mind's just frozen over. Yeah, well, oh yes, and we have to finish Hamas off. We can't let them come back again. We've got to do that. I mean, after all, so far, I mean, 711 at least Israeli soldiers have been killed, and that will just seem like a massive waste if Hamas are allowed to come back. I mean, this has cost a lot for the nation economically and emotionally and everything. I don't think we can let this, in the short term, I don't think we can accept anything without those conditions being fulfilled.
Yeah, very good. Andy, will Christian nationalism be the catalyst of anti-Christian protests and movements? Will anti-Semitism and hate for Christians dovetail?
Oh my, yeah. Well, the last point, probably yes. On the last point, whether Christian nationalism. Can you repeat the first part of the question again?
Yeah. No problem. No problem. Will Christian nationalism be the catalyst of anti-Christian protests and movements?
I mean, look, I'm not a prophet. I can't see. I can only sort of speculate, really. But it's certainly a possibility. Because as the West has become increasingly de-Christianized and anti-Christian, that is a distinct possibility, isn't it?
Very much so. Very much so.
I mean, already there's resentment against Christians from the left and hatred. So even nominal Christianity and the kind of political Christianity that Christian nationalism would bring, you could really see that being absolutely loathed and hated. And of course, even if it was only done by nominal Christians, by default, anybody who appeared to be Christian would also become, even the genuine ones would be equally hated, I think.
If you watch that movie God and Country by Rob Reiner, I think it was the director, there are a lot of Christians, I mean, they call themselves Christians in that movie, that are against Christians, who really will be considered Christian nationalists, basically those who are against LGBT, those who are against abortion, who love their country. They're painted as white Christian nationalism as the worst form of being in the world, and these statements are said by supposedly Christians, Russell Moore, Southern Baptist Convention, other Christians on the left, who see their Marxist ideology as being the gospel. So you're right, and it is fomenting that, and it could be, and I can say probably could be a catalyst for that, among other things.
It's a very difficult time now to be very quickly to be really faithfully walking with the Lord, because the temptation is there, to want to see an end to all this horrible woke garbage and everything. And let's face it, most of us will vote. I mean, I'm not an American citizen, but I can imagine that most Christians will vote for, even genuine believers will vote for Donald Trump, because the alternative is another 4 years of the current clown.
Yeah, Jay.
I just wanted to, mention, we have to reject the moniker of Christian nationalism as vehemently as we can. Christians are ambassadors of a different country. It's not one of the earth. It's the kingdom where Christ is king. Christian nationalism, we have to expect the world to be the way it is. The Christians in the
Yeah.
first century looked at Rome and they saw the complete decay of morality and said, this is the world, this is what we're not supposed to be part of. We cannot force Christian morals nationally in any country. The moment we do that, that is when we become that same stain, and we're going to have to go and flee to Israel at the same time, because that's going to be the only place we can.
Good point. Good point, Jay. Yeah, it's come down to that. We'll come down to that. Andy, won't the two witnesses appear around the same time as the rise of the Antichrist? Wouldn't this consideration be a great encouragement, comfort, and blessing for facing each day ahead?
Well, that's a long question. Right, the two witnesses, I would place them in the second half of the 70th week. There are a number of reasons for that. And yes, I think part of their function, I think, will be to encourage believers during that time and warn them of the day of the Lord coming, so that they, to protect, to help strengthen them against apostasy, because it's going to be so awful. But also they'll also have the function of calling Israel to repentance as well. The ministry of the two witnesses may be very, very closely linked with that helping to call that remnant of Israel that we see in their ministry may be partly responsible for the 144,000 that we see in Revelation 7. So I think there will be a great encouragement, and we're going to need that. I think in that if we are called to endure that, I think that will be a great encouragement to believers at that time.
Praise God. All right, thank you. Andy, did you know that Pope Francis said Jesus' life ended in failure, the failure of the cross?
Well, I never. Oh boy, that guy. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think that the scriptures ever presented Jesus's crucifixion as a failure. I mean, it talks in Colossians that he led the powers and principalities captive.
Yeah, triumph.
In triumph, yeah, and nailed our sins and transgressions that were witnessed against us to the cross. I don't call that a failure.
Amen. Well, there's a lot of things the Pope has gotten tremendously wrong.
Oh yeah, yes,
tremendously wrong, including Well, anyway, I'll just leave it at that. If there are false prophets, Andy, in the last days, will there be true ones?
Well, we do know of two, and that's the two witnesses. We don't hear of any. We don't. There doesn't appear to be, at least not explicit, evidence of another large scale, of other prophetic ministry that I can think of anyway. But apart from the two witnesses.
All right, very good. This is for the panel. So here's maybe the panel. Ask the panel if they think America should take to the gun to get their country back. Israel's defending herself. Why can't Americans fight for her freedom? Because it looks like she's in trouble.
What a question. You know what? I'll try to tackle this one.
All right, go ahead, Jay.
Here's what I say. We're called to follow the law, correct? Yes. Especially of the countries and the people that are placed above us. However, above those people is the Constitution, is a law that has been established for us. So what is the highest calling of an American? I am just saying an American. I am not saying a Christian. I am saying an American. The highest calling of an American is to uphold the Constitution. And if our leaders refuse to follow the Constitution, continue to disenfranchise the citizens that they're supposed to protect, I don't think there's many options that an American has.
Yeah, it may come down to that. It may come down to that too. And I think that's the concern, isn't it? We talked about Civil War. We talked about some of these movies that are coming out. I think that's the expectations in so many people, that there's going to be no other option but do this. You know, I know Israel's defending herself. I think there will be Americans who will do that for sure. I think there'll be Americans that will fight back.
I think
Go ahead, Dan.
I think the what do you call it? The not definition, but the distinction needs to be made between defending yourself, though, and becoming like vigilante kind of style. Defending yourself, yes, I think a big biblical argument could be made, but to become a vigilante, kind of thing, no, I would probably disagree. But yeah, to defend, yes.
All right, very good. Andy, could the temple be built with a lot of controversy, and then the Antichrist strikes a deal with the Jews and Muslims? Why would Satan build the temple when he knows it'll be his demise?
Well, for a start, I don't think that the temple is necessarily built with under satanic inspiration. I mean, it's something that the Lord obviously permits, but I wouldn't go so far as to say it's directly satanic. The problem, there are certain things like in Daniel 9 where it talks about this deal with Antichrist, but it doesn't say directly that Antichrist is the one who inspires the building of the temple. Only that it doesn't even say directly that the temple comes about as a result of that deal. Now, that's more kind of something that we infer into the text there. I'm not saying that that's incorrect to infer that, just that it's not directly stated in Daniel 9. So, it's probably reading too much into it to say that it's satanically inspired.
Yeah, so it's controversy. Will the Antichrist strike a deal, right?
Well, it does appear that is the case, but yeah, how directly that deal relates to that deal relates to the temple is debatable. I mean, we kind of tend to think that it's that deal that enables perhaps the rebuilding of the temple, that Antichrist's patronage enables that, and that's what we infer into the text. But that's not 100% certain. It's not entirely impossible that there could actually be a functioning temple before the 70th week of Daniel occurs or begins. It's not entirely impossible. We tend to read the text a certain way because that's what we've learned from often pre-tribulational Bible interpreters. So we need to to have a little bit of an open mind about that. And I certainly think that there'll be controversy surrounding it, because for a start, even at the moment, the surrounding Islamic nations won't be too thrilled about the idea if we wanted to do that. I think that to rebuild the temple would require a great deal of national confidence and religious confidence within Israel. We'd probably have to feel a bit more secure. And part of this current process we're going through with the in a sense with Biden's withholding of arms, and it will encourage us to manufacture our own munitions here more and become less reliant on the West. That may result to a sense of national confidence here, which may be a catalyst towards building a temple. You know, especially as the country is becoming more religious over here, it is getting more religious. And these are just, you know, so that these are speculations, but they're thoughts to, you know, they are definite trends that could happen.
Yeah, you know, ultimately Satan wants to be worshipped, right? So that's really the point. Satan wants to be worshipped in the temple of God, as if he is God, and that's where the aim is, you know. And all Daniel 9 says that he'll confirm a covenant with the many.
Yes.
And in the middle of the week, he will make an end of sacrifices and grain offerings. So he will make a covenant. He will confirm a covenant. He will strengthen the covenant,
Yes.
literally, but then he'll stop it. He'll stop.
Yeah, and when you and when you also look at the Luke account of that, you know, which is the same. The Olivet Discourse is, you know, Luke has some slightly different details, but it's clearly speaking of the same period of time. And it says, you know, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then get out of there as fast as possible. So it suggests also that Antichrist forcibly enters the temple precincts and takes over. So
that is true. Yeah. But then it talks about on the wing of abominations he will come to make desolate. So that is true. Go ahead, Jim.
If I may add some food for thought, we have a historical example of what an antichrist could look like with the Mongol Empire. Islam bowed the knee, and as long as Islam was willing to say that the Khanate was the supreme power, they were allowed to practice their religion. In fact, a lot of them felt very encouraged to be part of an army that was conquering the world. The same is true for the Christians that capitulated in the northern parts of Russia. They were allowed to join and continue to practice their religion. Buddhists, obviously, same thing. I think when we look at the Antichrist, we have to understand no one will be able to fight him and win. Therefore, everyone who is usually an enemy of each other will suddenly go, wait, this guy's on his side, then I'm not going to mess with them.
Very true. Mongol Empire. Everybody got to practice their faith.
Yep. As long as you said that the person on the throne was the supreme power,
supreme power, very similar to the Roman.
It's very similar to Roman.
All right, last question, Andy. Here we go. Speaking of Daniel 9, Andy, I have a friend who thinks he in Daniel 9:27, it's actually Jesus, not the Antichrist, and they believe the abomination of desolation has already happened. Where does this come from?
Oh. This is historicism, isn't it? Or preterism again. It's the same thing. The problem is with this is that I don't know I can't remember where the beginnings of this doctrine came, but you know, Paul wrote that this is a future event. The book of Revelation in AD 90, around about AD 96 or something was written, and that also puts, you know, what is the abomination of desolation as a future event. So and of course you've got also the church fathers and the early post-apostolic church also putting it as a future event. So what was the question again?
The text of Daniel 9:27, he who makes a covenant with the many is not the Antichrist, it is actually Jesus. And the abomination of desolation has already happened. So the question is, where does this come from?
I think ultimately, let me just get the text up actually. It's a while since I've looked at this. Excuse me a second. There we go. It's Daniel 9,
9:27,
My brain's getting a bit fried now.
That's the last question, Andy. So I know it's late for you.
Yeah, it's early in the morning here now, and I've been away. Excuse me a second.
See, we keep Andy up. He won't be. He will say he doesn't want to come back to catching up because we keep him up to. We got to get him to bed pretty soon.
There are a number of different opinions about this, actually. Interestingly enough, of course there are. Okay. After the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed. Shall make a strong covenant with many. Okay. It is a while since I've looked at this. Okay. Yeah, it's trying to read in that. Yeah, I can see that it's trying to read in verse 26 and read that as being Christ that destroys the city and the sanctuary, because that's what it would mean.
Right.
If the one that makes a strong covenant is, because the preceding, the referent is in verse 20. Yeah, this is actually a very interesting text. I mean, I don't know where this particular idea that this is supposed to be Christ that makes you strong covenant, where it originated. It's a long, but
I know within the Reform and Calvinist thinking that is one interpretation they have, that
that's one of the
a 7-year covenant, but then so the half of it would be 3.5, so that would be the length of Jesus's ministry, and then he would bring an end to sacrifice and grain offering because he is the fulfillment of it all. But there's a lot of
that's the theological reasoning behind it.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems. Like, there's no 7-year covenant that he made with the Jews. There's no evidence of Jesus ever destroying the sanctuary and the place.
But also, it doesn't actually. It says the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and sanctuary. So if they're saying that Jesus is the prince who is to come, there, it's the people of the prince who is to come, and we kind of know that. Okay, it wasn't Jews and it wasn't Christians who,
it was pagan Rome.
Yeah, when they do, pagan Rome, exactly. When they try to make this a 70 AD thing, none of it makes sense. None of it.
None of it makes sense. And
there is
the fulfillment when Jesus talks about that. Hey, when you see the abomination of desolation, it's a future event, and you're absolutely right, Andy. Both Paul and Jesus make that a future event.
Yeah, basically that to interpret it as that, and the other way that is to indulge in some form of preterism, and you'll end up with mangling a load of other scriptures as well, and you have to deny everything that Paul and said, and also in the book of Revelation as well.
Yeah,
that's a problematic interpretation, to say the least. If you find that there, you'll find that there's other weird stuff going on in someone's eschatology as well, if they're believing that.
Yeah, so we don't know where it came from. That would be an interesting question, but we know in preterism, historicism, and Calvinistic and Reformed thinking, on some level, they do hold to that interpretation that he of 927 is Jesus, and the breaking of the covenant is when they basically rejected him. He went to the cross, and therefore he put an end to all those things. Which, and like you said, Andy, it's problematic in a lot of different ways, from the text, from the context, from other co-texts. So it's a good question, though, because I have run into that.
But there are some. I mean, I won't. There is, between Daniel 26 and Daniel 27. It's not an easy text, because you've got after the 62 weeks, you've got an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing. And then you also got the people of the prince who is to come. So you've got actually three possible reference for the thing for the he in verse 27. And grammatically, basically what will make your choice about what that he refers to is your underlying theology. It's a theological rather than a grammatical decision there.
Yeah,
you understand what I mean?
Bring an abomination. When did Jesus bring an abomination?
Yes.
It makes no sense if that's the Messiah himself doing the very thing that Jesus warns about in Matthew. So there's quite problematic with that. All right. Well, thank you, Andy. Appreciate it. Thank you guys for staying up with us. Thank you, everyone who's watching live. Thank you, those who will watch later. We appreciate you. Always your questions are always welcome. Your comments, very appreciative. By far, your prayers. Prayer for Andy. Go check out his channel, Because Doctrine Matters, on YouTube, on X, Because Doctrine Matters. I think we put it up last time. There's some videos on Memorial TV that are from Andy. Andy, keep doing a good work out there. Keep serving Jesus. Keep preaching Jesus. Keep standing up for the faith. Keep refuting some of these false things that come up, whether it's tikkun, whether it's false eschatologies. You do a good job, and we appreciate your work, and you keep doing it, please.
Thank you.
Thank you for staying up. Plus, it is Saturday morning for you, so thank you.
Yes.
Saturday morning, yeah, and it is Saturday morning for Davey. It's not quite Saturday morning here for us. Jay, it is afternoon, so we get to enjoy the rest of the day, I suppose, when there's more work ahead. So we thank you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for staying up with us. Those in Australia, good morning. Have a good Saturday. In Israel, Shabbat Shalom. Good Saturday.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom. For the rest of us, well, it's a good Friday afternoon. David and Jacob are in New Zealand preaching and teaching, so keep them in prayer, and they'll go on to Australia. So God bless you, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Hello, and thank you for watching Moriel TV. There are so many things that are happening at Moriel Ministries worldwide, from the Philippines to Japan to India to Africa and back to Europe and the United States. So many of our brothers and sisters are spreading the good news of Jesus Christ to this lost world. We are so thankful for your prayers. God has been faithful and has blessed us in so many ways. If you'd like to partner with our efforts abroad and at home, please take a moment to click the link in the description and help us as the Lord leads you. Thank you very much, and God bless.